Stouffer of First United Baptist Church. If you will please come forward, Pastor. After invocation, if you so choose to, it will be followed by the pledge. If you care to join in, thank you.
Let's pray together. God, we give you thanks for this day, for the love and the grace that you shower upon us. We thank you for our city leaders, our community leaders, and all of our people. And we pray that in this meeting and in every meeting and in every day, that through our words, our thoughts, and our actions, we would seek to bring glory to your name and to be good neighbors that you call us to be. Guide us all of our days that we might be found faithful. We pray this through Christ our Lord. And all God's people said, amen.
Amen. Please join us in the nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will you please silence your cell phones if you have not done so? May I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Mouton.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Samuel.
Present.
Councilmember Durio.
Here.
Councilmember Getz.
Present.
Councilmember Turner.
Here.
Councilmember Felshaw.
Present.
And Councilmember Neal. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have one presentation from our City Health Director. Will you please come forward? Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm just coming to give an update from last week and just to give you guys some numbers of where we are within our city. I was with you guys on the 10th, last Tuesday, and from the 10th through the 16th in Jefferson County, we had an additional 931 positive cases of COVID, with 116 reported today. So that brings a total of 1,047 within a week. Within that same time, we had 15 deaths reported in the county, but we had an additional 7 deaths reported today. The age group of 14 to 17 represent 11% of those cases. School has just opened. Every school that's open has already reported cases. So we're seeing cases amongst our kids that's in school. But we do have some good news, is that on last time I was with you, it was 27% of kids 12 to 15 received their first dose. As of today, that's up to 31%. So we're seeing an increase in the number of our kids getting vaccinated. But we have a long way to go. Very, very long way to go. Hospitals, last time I was with you, we had 208 patients between the 3 hospitals. 192 of that 208 was unvaccinated. Only 16 was vaccinated. We had 31 people on ventilators. Of that, only 1 was vaccinated. Today, we have 227 patients in our hospitals, and only 14 is vaccinated, which means 94% of the hospital is unvaccinated. We have 50 of our citizens that's on ventilators, and none of them are vaccinated. So this is where we stand locally as it relates to COVID. Now, region-wide, you know, we're in trauma service area R, which is 9 counties. Jefferson, Hardin, Orange, Newton, Jasper, Liberty, Chambers, Galveston County, and Brazoria. That's the trauma service area we're in. As of yesterday, between those 9 counties, we only had 2 ICU beds available between the 9 counties, and only 130 hospital beds available between those 9 counties. Our positivity rate as relates to the number of COVID people in the hospital for our trauma service area is 32%. which means our area, we have the highest positivity rate of COVID people in our hospitals in the entire state of Texas. So it's really serious in our local area. Any questions? That was just a quick update of where we are, where we stand.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'd like to know if there's been any information from the CDC concerning the ability of children under 12 to get COVID.
To catch COVID?
Yes.
Oh, we have kids in our area that's under 12. We have them as young as 11 months that test positive.
And only 27% of the youth from 12 to 15 are vaccinated, correct?
That's reported, yes.
Reported. So that would tell me if there are no children under 12 getting vaccinated, that population is at risk.
Oh, that's the most vulnerable population because they are not able to get the vaccine.
And at schools, they are not requiring masks.
That's correct. Because they can't require masks due to the governor's order and to TEA guidance. They cannot require kids to wear masks in schools.
Another question, just for clarification, when it comes to a kid possibly being positive for coronavirus, the tracing, you said they no longer they will not notify parents, just for clarification for everybody watching.
Per the CDC guidance, schools do not have to contact trace within the school system. That's correct.
You know if BISD is doing it?
Well, they just started. Talking with the COVID coordinator, they're doing what they call a notification. And what was explained to me was that if a kid tests positive, they would just notify the parents of the students that may have been in the class with the kid, letting the parents know that your kid or your child was possibly exposed to COVID. But the other side of that is, based on TEA guidance, if a kid is exposed to COVID or identified as a close contact, but that kid is asymptomatic, meaning they have no visible symptoms, then it's up to the parent to make the decision whether or not to send the kid back to school or keep the kid home to quarantine.
I'm gonna
have
call
to let
it-
the school know that their kid is positive.
Pardon me now?
They don't have to actually notify the school of a positive. If, say, the parent gets a kid tested and knows that they're positive, do they have to notify the school?
They don't have to notify the school, but we will as public health. Once we get a copy of that positive test result, then we would ask the parent what school the kid attends, then we notify the school.
Do y'all
Will
get
you
all
require-
those results?
We get the ones that we get. Now, by law, everybody's supposed to report their positive results to us. But sometimes, it's timely. But you can go take a test in Houston and test positive, and I probably would never see that result, even though you live and reside in Beaumont.
So if a kid tests positive, you are aware of it, you are not requiring them to quarantine?
We follow CDC guidance, and CDC guidance says if a person tests positive, they are the quarantine. Well, let me rephrase that. When you're positive, then you go into isolation for 10 days if you're positive. Now, if you're a contact to a case, then that's when you quarantine for 14 days. That's CDC's guidance, and that's the guidance that we follow as public health. But TEA have their own guidance that they've shared with the schools. So the schools have to follow TEA guidance. And TEA guidance says that a kid is positive, right? They can quarantine for 10 days. No test, symptom-free, they can return back to school, right? But if a kid is a contact, they have the option to quarantine for the 14 days or they can do what they call test out of quarantine, meaning that you contact, then you can test in 7 days. And if your test results are negative, then you can return back to school. We don't necessarily agree with that simply because of what we faced last year. We had some kids that did that. They test out of quarantine, returned back to campus on the 7th day. The 9th day, they start exhibiting symptoms and end up testing positive.
Thank you. Councilmember Philshaw.
Kenneth, I respect a person's right to choose to take the vaccine or to not take the vaccine. I think that's a personal choice. But what would you say to people watching online and here in the building that are afraid of the vaccine? Because we've all heard through social media the things that could happen, whether it's blood clots or heart condition or the long-term effect. And I know that fear is what's holding a lot of people back. So what would you say to people that have this fear, and how would you help them to get over that to get the vaccine?
What we say is that we ask everyone to consult a primary care physician if they have any questions or concerns about the vaccine. And also to get your information from credible sources. They can come to the health department. They can call the health department. We do the best we can as educating them on the safety of the vaccine and the importance of the vaccine. But what we're dealing with is so much misinformation that's out there, and a lot of people are adhering to what they're reading and hearing on social media, what their neighbors may be saying. But we just encourage everyone to talk to their primary care physician if they have any concerns about the vaccine and whether or not they are a candidate for it.
What is the percentage of people that we have so far that's had a negative reaction to the vaccine? Do you know those numbers?
I don't have those numbers. That's not necessarily reported to us. But what I read from CDC's website of the number of people, we have well over 165 million people that have taken this vaccine, and negative effects, it's almost zero in comparison to the number of people who have taken it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Kenneth, thank you so very much for
You're
your
welcome.
information. I would like to say that since August the 10th until yesterday, the 16th, our health director just gave us the numbers of 1,047 people testing positive in 1 week
And 22 deaths.
and 22 deaths, 7 being today,
Yes.
before
Reported
you
to us
got to
today.
this meeting.
Yes.
And so the day is not over, unfortunately.
I do have one other question.
Councilmember
Mr.
Salmon.
Coleman,
Yes, sir.
so far, how many deaths have we had in Beaumont as a result of taking the vaccination?
That's taken the vaccination. We don't get that information about the deaths in terms of which ones have been vaccinated. I can start asking for that from the hospital. We wait till we get the report from the hospital, and that's not on the report.
Okay, I'd like that, but that wasn't the question, my
Okay.
intended question. My intended question, how many have we had recognized that they died as a result of taking the vaccination? Or the vaccination is the cause of death?
Locally, none that I'm aware of. Nationally, there have only been a few. But they're doing research to see whether or not it was actually caused from the vaccine, or did they have any other underlying health conditions that may have contributed to their death.
Councilmember Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. And this might be more geared towards Chief White. How is this affecting the backlog for E EMS?
Well, I can answer that, Chief, if you come on.
Thank you, Chief White.
Good evening, Council and City Manager. Greatly. I spoke with the City Manager yesterday on some things that we're going to be instituting, trying to keep med units on the street and working in conjunction with the two hospitals to what we call wall time. When we transport someone to the hospital, we have to have what we call patient transfer. And so we're going to be instituting something by putting a couple paramedics at the hospital to stay with the patients where we can get the med units back on the street. Our call volume has gone up tremendously.
And the reason I asked that is, and you hit on that, Sunday I had the opportunity to go up to Baptist Hospital and I sat out in the parking lot for about 3 hours.
Yes, sir.
And there was an average of 25 ambulances sitting there the entire time I was there.
Yes, sir.
And very few were coming because there was no other room in the hospital. And the EMS was being forced to stay in the ER with these patients until they could transfer, like you said, into the higher level
Patient
of
care.
And it's just causing major issues.
And it's a reflection on the numbers that Mr. Coleman gave on the positive tests going up and everything. So that's total reflection. We're working hand in hand with the health department for the vaccination. And again, like Kenneth is saying, get vaccinated.
Councilmember Turner.
So as far as deaths, what number are we actually counting, and what about the people that go get tested but die outside of the hospital? Do we know about those? Are those included in the numbers, or we don't know about those? We just know about the ones that actually reported from the hospital.
Exactly. Last year, in one of the executive orders issued by the governor, was that if a person died at home and was exhibiting symptoms related to COVID, they didn't have to do an autopsy. So we may never know the true number of deaths that was COVID related if they died at home.
Any other? Councilmember Durio.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, sir.
any estimation on when how long before the curves might start to turn?
Well, that's hard to predict right now, because at the rate we're going, it's beyond serious. Our largest school district started today, which is BISD. So we're talking about 18,000 plus kids, and I'm just a little concerned as to what we might see. Because I'm looking at what's happening around the country. I mean, you have school districts in Georgia. The whole school district had to shut down due to positive cases among students and staff. We had a 12-year-old in Dayton to pass, a 13-year-old in Mississippi to pass. So I don't want people to think that this virus does not impact young kids, right? This Delta variant has changed the game. It has really changed the game. And that's our most vulnerable, because in BISD, you got 8,500 kids who cannot take the vaccine due to their age. Now, that's a lot of kids. That's 8,500 kids in that district who cannot take the vaccine. I mean, we have them as young as 11 months. We've seen some as young as 7 months that test positive. I just talked to a daycare owner. She had to shut down. Not only was the kids positive, she herself tested positive. So this is what we're dealing with within our city. And that's why I'm just encouraging everyone who can medically and age eligible to get the vaccine. Please wear your mask, because that's our only protection against this virus. And that's the only way we're going to overcome. That's the only way we're going to defeat it. And then we still have a large portion of the community that's not wearing the mask and refuse to get vaccinated. And that's when we're going to run into another variant coming along that the virus may not even work against. And then we back at square one.
Councilmember
One more question. Are we at a place where we can distinguish the Delta variant from just COVID-19?
It has to be sequenced in the lab. And what hospitals are doing now, they really just doing sequencing on people that's in the hospital who have been vaccinated. And they'll send it out to have that sequence to see if it's the Delta variant.
Mr. Coleman, You made a comment that it's 8,500 children that are under the age of 12 that cannot be vaccinated. What is the number 12 and above? Do you know the number of students?
Oh, no, not in BISD.
Okay.
I mean, it's right at 18,000, so I would imagine 10, right at 10,000
Right at 10.
kids who are age eligible to get vaccinated.
Any other questions? Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much for your report, and we appreciate you coming. Now is the time for any citizen that would like to speak. If you would like to make a public comment on either the scheduled agenda items number 1 through 8 and 10, or either the consent agenda, please make sure that you fill out a green slip at the back of the room. Bring it to our clerk. She will call your name when it's time for you to speak. You will have 3 minutes to speak. The green light will come on. And at the end of your 3 minutes, the red light will come on to let you know that your time has ended.
James Eller, 2332 Avalon, Beaumont, Texas, items 8 and 10.
How y'all doing? Want to talk about a couple of things. Number 6, the pipe busting. Whenever they did pipe busting in Old Town area, I don't know who did it actually, but whenever they connected the sewer lines in my backyard, they dumped just a bag of concrete loose around the pipe, and I'm hoping that that's not the process on securing the saddle whenever it, the T joint of the main. So if y'all could look into that, if that's a proper way to do it, okay, but I don't think that's the proper way to do it. On number 8, the consideration of a high water vehicle for fire department, definitely, but since the South End area was extremely, or affected real bad, I had ended up making a turn off of Washington onto Fournette and ended up having water over my hood, which was like that. So the South End, definitely, the Pear Archer area, the South End area, I had people that were in at least knee-hip water in their houses that were flicking their porch lights for, people to rescue them, elderly, whatever else. If we could look into more vehicles than just one, I think the capacity is needed for at least 1 to 3 vehicles. 3 vehicles, definitely, for if it's going to be a deuce or one of the bigger trucks, or even I think it's a APX or something like that. It's a lightweight military vehicle. I've mentioned that a few times on my Beaumont, Texas information station about the different types of vehicles. If I could speak on the public hearings about the 8465 Fraser Drive, it was a public nuisance issue about guy collecting a whole bunch of stuff. Me and Mike Getz had actually went out there and cleaned up the front yard at one point in time with some more volunteers from the area. If we could look into also having volunteers from the community, look into possibly working with the city whenever there's issues like this that arise, or like paint peeling off of homes or whatever else, citizens that are in need of help, either mentally or if it's physically or whatever it might be, high yards that needs to be mowed, elderly. If we could look into having citizens that would technically care and would be able to work with the city to go ahead and get some of these issues taken care of. I know I deal with the city issues myself, so I know how it feels sometimes when the city is all on you and you feel overwhelmed. With the permitting process, the last thing, plumbing and electrical has to be updated, even in an empty home that's going to stay boarded up and empty until the remodel is done. It has to be redone completely before a certain timeline. Now, I know the city works with the citizens on trying to get more time here and there, but if that can be eliminated as a key time point, that'd be great, as well as heating in the house. If a house is going to be used as storage or something like that and not being used as a home, a person to stay in, why does the housing have to have heating in it actually? So if we could look into a couple of those things.
Thank you.
LaShawn Proctor, 4680 Jen Carr Drive, Beaumont, Texas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I was coming to talk about item 10 on the agenda, and it's just in regards to the council, well, the city and the mandates of permitting buildings and things like that that's coming into play. I use myself for an example. We purchased a building on 11th, and of course, we've been doing the process of trying to get all the permits and things done like that. We're not doing anything new in the building. We're going to go back in really and put up walls back where the walls were. But it came up to where we needed to have plans for the building, new plans done. The building was already, it was flooded is what happened. So the building was gutted. In gutting it, they just took down all of the sheetrock, took down all of the installation, done all of those things. Everything, electrical panel and all of those things stayed intact. We had electrician company come in and look at all of the things as far as going back in. What do we need to do as far as doing everything to put it in for what we're trying to do? They said everything was fine as far as the electrical, check the plugs and all of those things, but then came in that we needed plans. I'm just not understanding and why are plans, I guess, needed for an existing building, or is that something that's done? We look at Beaumont, we're trying to grow Beaumont, trying to do business, bring businesses into Beaumont, new businesses. I think most of the businesses that here are basically expanding. You know, a lot of times I think we have very few new businesses coming in a sense, I just say that in my neighborhood where I am. We're expanding and doing more things in there. And I think that we're not trying to get around the codes, but I think sometimes making things a little bit more difficult, spending more money for small businesses is something that becomes discouraging for small businesses. We understand that your large companies bring in a lot of tax base, but when you look at your tax base, I think a lot of it is brought from small businesses such as ours that come into communities that put business in, that put taxes in. We're going to have, the taxes are going to go up. I know that was something that was said in the last meeting about the tax increase and things like that. That's going to affect us as a small business. And when we have the type of business and stuff that we have, it's going to be quite a bit of money that we're going to have to pay in business. But small businesses are affected by that more than your larger corporations, I think, because it takes a little bit more. So not looking for anything to get around, but I think that if we can work with some of those things as far as small business have to put out more money in order to just get the businesses, like, again, with plans that for an existing business that the city already has the plans on. They already have them. They had them when the building was built, things like that. If it's not anything that we're going to tear down walls, move things or anything like that, then those electrical plans, HVAC plans, if everything is going back in a place where it is, that's one of the questions that I have. Is that something that's going to be required for all businesses? Because if you got to get plans redone, you know, plans can get really, really expensive for a commercial business, a building, you know, and those things are just something that can set you back or make you say, you know what, I don't even want to do this project, you know, and that affects us as small businesses. So those are just some things that we'd like to have looked at. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. At this time, may I have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed? The motion carries. Mr. City Manager, may I have the reading of item number 8, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and Council, item number 8 is to consider approving the purchase of a high water vehicle for use in the fire department. The vehicle would be purchased from General Truck Body Manufacturing Company of Houston in the amount of $185,019. The new unit would be in addition to the fleet under fire operations, and if approved today would be our second high water vehicle. We have one that's hopefully we'll receive in the middle of September, the first one. It will be used for the rescue of citizens in the event of rising waters. This is a non-budgeted purchase. The vehicle would be paid for with cash in the Capital Reserve Fund. The administration recommends approval.
You've heard the reading of the motion. I'm sorry, you've heard the reading of item number 8. May I have a motion, please?
So move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Felshaw.
City Manager, could you speak to the truck that's coming, you said in September? Could you speak to that truck and the cost of that truck?
think it's somewhere in the neighborhood, I don't have those figures in front of me, somewhere between probably 150 and 200,000, the first one. The chief can come forward. It's gonna be a retrofit of a dump truck that the council's already approved. And then if you approve the second one, do you know what the cost was that first one?
We already had the truck that Fleet Maintenance was retrofitting. The cost of the actual tailgate, the lift gate, is approximately $40,000. So there's a cost saving there by having the vehicle and retrofitting it at Fleet, and it got moved to Houston last Friday for retrofitting of the tailgate to general truck body.
So what's the comparison between that vehicle, total cost, and this vehicle here, I think at 180, you said, city manager?
This one's 185,000 if you approve it today.
And this is a new truck?
And he's saying we took one from Fleet, a dump truck, and the
Right.
retrofit was 40,000.
It's just 40,000. But you said it was sent to Houston?
Yes, to
For
general.
other work done?
Yes.
So there's gonna be more cost?
No.
That's the
Okay.
cost.
That's the cost.
That's the total
$40,000 is the cost to retrofit the existing truck that we had to transfer it into becoming an additional high water vehicle in addition to the one that you may approve today.
Okay, so the comparison is 40,000 or 185,000?
40,000 for the retrofit that we already have, and 185 for a new or a reconditioned truck with a 1-year warranty.
And is
Yeah.
there the possibility of other retrofits?
There are. I misunderstood you earlier. You know the vehicle the council went to see at the EOC? It's not a brand new vehicle, but that's the 185,000 before you today. The one probably a month ago when the council approved it
Yes.
was taking an existing dump truck we had out at Fleet and then sending it to Houston for this retrofit.
And they both would function comparable?
Absolutely.
Wait.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They function comparably. However, the truck that we first initially approved is simply a dump truck that has been retrofitted
Yes.
with a lift to allow in emergencies to pick people up and get them out of the high water.
Right.
It is a dump truck retrofitted with a lift.
Right.
The vehicle that we looked at a couple of weeks ago is a used vehicle that is designed and built as a rescue vehicle.
Right.
out of high
Specifically
water.
for
high
high water.
Specifically.
Yes.
So
All the
there-
electronics has been raised, the intake, air intake and everything, undercoating to prevent water seepage and intrusion.
So there's a great difference between the two vehicles,
Yes, sir.
but they can be used in emergency situations.
The same.
And prior to this, we've used dump trucks through Rita, Ike, all of these.
Yes,
So that is what, to make
Which
sure
are
you
very
understand.
labor intensive.
Correct. Because physically, people had to be lifted and put into the beds of trucks at many times.
Yes, bed bound, wheelchair bound, which with these purchases and putting these units in service is going to greatly reduce our actual physical manpower.
And possible injuries as a result of
Yes,
trying
back
to do that.
injuries, strains, and things like that.
But if you have, with the dump truck that you're talking about retroing, with the lift on it, I think, are you putting benches in there for people to sit on?
Yes, yes.
So once this is, fitted out, we'll be able to lift people up, they'll be able to sit down, we'll be able to transport them. Is there a big advantage to the 185,000 as opposed to the 40,000?
Absolutely, there is. With the new unit that we're purchasing, it's coming with folding seats, which will allow us to actually not remove people from the wheelchairs. It'll be a 12-foot body. We can put the seats up. We're putting tie downs where we can physically tie down the wheelchairs, load them up, move to the next. So it's a definite advantage with the new purchase of the new truck.
Okay.
Councilmember Turner.
Question, in the past, have you guys done rescues out of fire trucks as well as dump trucks?
Yes, sir. In fact, during Imelda, that was a definite deal. And unfortunately, we flooded a couple fire trucks, 3 of them to be exact, to the tune of $180,000, $90,000 in repairs.
Okay. And roughly how much does it cost just to purchase a brand new fire truck?
Anywhere from $800 to $1 million, depends on what you get.
Yeah. So basically, it's safe to say that today, looking at $179,000, $185,000, it can actually help reserve some of those $800 to $1 million investments that we have to use sometimes in reference to rescuing vehicles.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that's one of my concerns. Looking at the actuality of being able to save that investment versus going out there like you guys have in the past.
Now, the fire trucks were actually being used in actual rescues. And that's what the firefighters and the EMS workers do. That's not going to stop them. This is just going to be able to allow them to have something proper to handle the bed bound, the wheelchair bound, and not be as labor intensive on those rescues.
Chief, will you be coming back to us in the future to retrofit other dump trucks, or is that a one-time deal? Or are we just going to purchase like this truck here, $185,000? Are you just going to shift to buying these type of vehicles? And I'm all for the high water rescue trucks. I am 100%. Yes. I'm just trying to understand, you know, why we started out retroing a dump truck and now we shifted to this. I'm just trying to understand and justify the increase in cost.
Well, in the last 3 year last 2-3 year budget cycles, we've actually requested the sell a vehicle in our budget request, and it wasn't approved. So this isn't something new.
Okay, so in the future, though, will you go back to the dump trucks, or will you just come back again with?
My plan is to ask for 2 more high water vehicles, or at least 1 more, so I can have at least 1 high water vehicle per district.
Okay.
To affect
Chief.
rescues.
Mayor,
Councilmember Getz.
my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in the past we had been offered the opportunity to have surplus military high vehicles that could be used for rescue, but we were told that we should not get those because of maintenance expenses. Are you familiar with that at all?
No, that would have to come from the fleet manager.
Okay. I'm having that is my recollection.
I can tell you that other cities have accepted surplus vehicles to use for various things, high water included, and the cost on maintenance was astronomical. Very, very cost prohibitive.
What makes that so?
Because they don't actually give away their best. They hang on to stuff that's serviceable.
But we get them for free, right?
Under that program, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so if we have a maintenance item that is cost prohibitive, we haven't lost any money, right?
You hadn't lost any money, but it versus cost of repairs, even if you got it free. If it's not working and it's cost prohibitive, it doesn't do you any good, Councilman.
I totally agree with that. I was just trying to understand.
If I thought the program worked, absolutely, I'd be all for it. But I've polled and seen in various other departments that it just doesn't work because it's just too cost prohibitive. They don't get a lot of use, and unless you have a maintenance program keeping them up and everything, when you need them, they don't work. And most people, they keep them outside and everything, and then when they go to use them, they don't work.
Well, that's true for most vehicles if you don't maintain them.
Absolutely.
You know, so
Yes,
that's not unique to those types of vehicles. I heard you say one thing that I'm proud of you guys on the one hand, but then I'm concerned on the other. You said that, you know, if y'all are out there on a call and y'all need to rescue somebody and y'all in a fire truck, y'all going to go.
Yes, sir.
And so I don't want anybody up here thinking that this is going to be some panacea that's going to prevent fire trucks from getting flooded out again, because from what you're telling us, that could happen.
It could. Let me. When I said we flooded out 3 fire trucks, one of them was actively engaged in transporting a stroke victim to Baptist Hospital. The other 2 were actively engaged in rescue operations on Carley Street. The other one was actively engaged in a rescue operations on Park Street.
Right, and of course we all remember how much water we had during
Yes,
the meltdown. I know that your guys are trained to go and serve and protect, and just like the police, and do rescues. Doesn't do anybody any good if we drive a fire truck into water and it floods out and it can't get where it needs to go. I don't know how you can know ahead of time whether or not it's too deep or not. I hope these high water rescue vehicles make a difference.
Prevents that, yes, sir.
I hope it prevents that. My concern is that they might not, but I understand the need to have them.
Well, when I'm looking at $190,000 of taxpayers' money for repair on 3 fire trucks versus retrofitting a brush truck and $185,000 for a new purchase, I think long-term there's going to be great benefit there.
Chief, one thing I would like to point out, you stated Corley Street, Park Street, and College Street headed
College
to
and I-10, yes. Yes, ma'am.
headed to Baptist Hospital.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to the water levels and those conditions? And if you can't, I'll be more than happy to, because I live in that area.
It was probably anywhere from 30 to 50 inches of water. If you look at fire trucks, they're pretty high. The electronics are mounted 30 to 35 inches up on a rail, and it was above that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And to the gentleman that spoke earlier, waist deep water is not uncommon in some areas of our city.
And at that time, waist deep water was not only on Washington, Finette, and 11th Street.
It was everywhere.
It was in my house.
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Absolutely.
I know the experience that you experienced.
So when you say waist deep water and you're headed to the hospital, there was really no way for you to avoid being in that in the deep water.
Yes, ma'am. And the situation on transporting a stroke victim to the hospital, we weren't able to transport that person in a med unit because of the high water. So I approved the decision to load them in the engine and get them there under exigent circumstances.
Thank you.
I have a question. Chief,
Councilmember Turner.
can these vehicles, are you guys the ones that are called out when, let's just say we just had 2 months of rain straight, almost losing in Beaumont, and around those car dealer strips across the street from Home Depot, often I can see cars being told not to go that way, and they still go that way, and they get stuck in water.
Yes, sir.
So when that happens, how do you guys address? Do y'all go out and are you guys the ones that are called out to go assist those people?
We are. We also have a dive team,
Mm-hmm.
and swift water rescue along with combination with BPD.
And these vehicles can actually be utilized in an instance like that, if possible?
They can, yes. Immediately put in service.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Felshaw.
Just curious, you may not have this information. I understand that this vehicle's $185,000. It's used, 1-year warranty. What would it cost if you went and bought one brand new?
I don't know that you can get one brand new. This is the ex-military vehicles that Councilman Getz referred to, that this company takes them and actually refurbishes them and puts over 600 new parts on them, undercoating the bottom and everything for water intrusion, and comes with the 1-year warranty and the option to buy an extended warranty on the Acela.
Okay, they don't build the specific brand.
No, so
Yeah,
they take military surplus vehicles. They purchase the vehicles and retrofit them.
Got it.
Councilmember Duria.
Yes, just speaking from personal experiences, when guys are on calls, sometime, especially during a hurricane or a flood or anything like that, and you're out there, you just have to make a decision, and they might just have to drive a fire truck through 36 inches of water without getting permission. But if you have somebody, a stroke victim in the hospital, we don't get to decide, well, we're not going to take them to the hospital. You're out there and you have to make those split-second decisions. You just have to do what you think is right for that particular time. And I think these vehicles, though, they're going to help out a lot. The guy's still going to be making calls on the fire truck, but in your situation, like where you were flooded and could not get out, they can get in to you with these vehicles, with these type of vehicles.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All in favor of approving item number 8, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No opposed? The motion carried. We have one public hearing this evening. Mr. City Manager, can you please take us into the public hearing?
Okay, I'll read the ordinance. It's an ordinance, entitled an ordinance finding certain property to be a public health nuisance and ordering abatement, authorizing cleanup, authorizing suit, providing for severability, and providing for a penalty. And our Public Health Director, Kenneth Coleman, will come forward and walk you through the item. And then after Mayor and Council, if we could have the public hearing, and then after the public hearing, consider approving the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is in reference to 8465 Fraser. Just to give you a little background, we've been dealing with this property June of 2020, March of 21, and now we're here today. And you guys have some pictures in your packet as to what we're dealing with. So far as the rodent harborage of section 1004.001, rat proofing required, every building or structure now constructed or hereafter constructed in the city shall be constructed and maintained in a rat-proof condition so as to prevent the entry of rats into and upon the premises. All buildings and structures, lots and premises shall be continuously kept by the owner, agent, tenant, leasee, person in charge, or occupant thereof in a clean sanitary conditions and free from rats. Section 10.0403, stacking and elevating materials. It shall be unlawful for any person who owns or occupies any lot or premises to suffer or permit lumber, boxes, barrels, loose iron, or other materials that may become a harborage for rats to accumulate or maintain on a lot or premise owned or occupied by such person, unless the lumber, boxes, barrels, loose iron, or other materials described above shall be placed on supports, neatly stacked, and elevated at least 2 feet from the ground with a clear intervening space between to prevent the harborage of rats. Excessive litter. 12.0702. It shall be unlawful and constitute an offense for a person to dispose of litter except in a container as defined in section 12.07.001 or in an authorized sanitary waste disposal site or in another approved area, depository, or vehicle designated for transport or disposal of litter, trash, garbage, and waste. And the last one we're citing him on is weeds. It shall be unlawful and constitute an offense in creation and maintenance of a public nuisance for any person, firm, or corporation who shall own or occupy any lot or premises to suffer or permit weeds, grass, or uncultivated plants other than trees to grow upon such a lot or premise within 100 feet of the property line of developed property to a greater height than 12 inches on an average. And so in dealing with this, we're just trying to get a hold of what's going on within our city and trying not to let it get out of hand. And again, we've been dealing with this property since June of last year.
Thank you. I will now open the floor for the public hearing of which you just read. If you are here to speak on the public hearing, and if you have not done so, please go to the back of the room, fill out the green slip, and our clerk will call your name when it's time for you to speak. The green light will come on for you to begin your 3 minutes, and the red light will come on when it's time for you to stop. Thank you.
James Eller, 2332 Avalon, Beaumont, Texas.
back again. So like I say, me and Mr. Getz had, Councilman Mike Getz had went out there and cleaned up the property before, and then after that, volunteered our time, and there was more citizens that actually volunteered the time. So like I say, I've seen the property. I've dealt with issues of my own per se also, but let's remember as well, 2610 Concord, which is now a city water department or sewer sanitation department site. There's actually metal stacked on the ground. There's litter and debris in the middle of that property as well that I called the city out on the city about, and the health department went out on that particular location and found that the city was in violation of their own ordinances. So make sure that if we're gonna hold citizens, that's why I say be polite to our citizens as well as citizens helping other citizens. But be polite to the citizens, because the city of Beaumont is in actual violation of their own ordinances on their own properties, where the city had to rent disposal boxes that the city had to then take time and cost of taxpayers' money to actually clean up the property that they dirtied on their own city property. As well as there's 1350 Langham, which is the city of Beaumont's water department. If you go on Google Maps, you'll see a satellite imagery of these two properties, and there's also the waste disposal at off of Finette. If you look at the properties, you'll see violations that the city actually has on their own properties to the same rat harborage that the city only gives, I think it was $150 to the exterminators per year in 2018 whenever I looked it up. So we're not spending a whole bunch for rat harborage. If we're gonna hold citizens to the same standard, let's make sure that the city is being held to the same standard as well, okay? So, just wanna add that. But like I say, if we could look into also citizens helping the citizens out in times of need, aren't we here for one another, right? Thank you.
Mayor, this concerns Fraser Drive. Can we inquire as to whether or not the owner is here and allow the owner to speak?
Sure.
Mr. Ian Culbertson is the owner. Is the owner here? Mr. Culbertson? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Is there anyone that'd like to make any other comment? Okay, I'm gonna close the floor. May I have a motion, please?
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor, and we've had the discussion.
Mayor, can we have discussion, further discussion
Sure.
for bias?
Sure, Councilmember Getz.
As Mr. Eller said, myself and he went to this residence and worked with the occupants of that residence to try to clean up their yard. Mr. Eller, how long is your flatbed?
It was 12 foot, and then the 16-foot trailer that we brought. So
We filled up that trailer. It was almost overflowing the sides. This was all stuffed just in the front yard. We didn't even get to the backyard. We made a dent in it, but we didn't get rid of all the trash and garbage in the front yard. In fact, the occupants told us there are things that they wanted to keep that I don't know why they wanted to keep it. A few months later, it was back as bad as ever. I don't know what they're doing over there. I don't know why they're doing it over there, but it's not fair to the neighborhood. I'm willing to work with citizens that have a need, but this isn't that. This is something else. This is either hoarding or something else is going on over there, and it is a public nuisance. And I know that this occurs in other parts of the cities, and we've acted appropriately like that to declare it as such. And what also bothers me about this is I believe they've been cited a number of times to appear in municipal court. Is that correct, Mr. Boone?
They had 3 hearings at municipal court and failed to appear at each.
So what do you do when you cite them? They fail to appear. They ignore the law. They ignore common courtesy and decency for their neighbors. They're not here tonight. It really leaves you no choice. And I think we need to go forward with this.
Councilmember Neal?
Thank you. So, Mr. Manager, can you talk about the time frame on how long this process takes to get it to this point?
So we have 6 inspectors right now, 6 code enforcement inspectors. One is the Oaks is assigned to the Oaks Historic District. So we have 6. Primarily, there's more inspectors working the south end and the north end because they're older areas of the city with more issues. And then one for sure assigned to the west end as needed. So by law, when you cite someone for litter or junk motor vehicles, high grass, other nuisances, you have to give them an opportunity to abate it themselves. And if they don't, for example, the high grass will go cut, junk motor vehicle will move forward and try to remove. When someone's a hoarder and they're storing all these materials, you cite them, and then that's over in municipal court, which takes time. And then with COVID, with court not being open, that's delayed it as well. So you give people an opportunity to correct it, and our staff is working with people every day to do that. And there are times like this, for example, where you give everyone the benefit of the doubt and you try to work with them, they don't clean it up, then you'll move forward with this process, which we've done more in the last couple of years, especially a little before COVID, than we have in many years. There are a lot of spots like this. Councilman Samuel, Mayor Pro Tem Samuel, and some other staff members, Mr. Cooper and Mr. Boone, went out today and drove around for probably an hour and a half looking at different spots. We probably drove by 10 particular locations where you would say they're hoarding. I mean, there's just stuff everywhere in their yard, driveway. It's a mess. So I was going to speak to a little later. We know we cannot speak just in general, continue what we're doing right now, what our plans are, Mr. Cooper. Would you rather me say that at the end?
You can say that. Let's just speak specifically to a public nuisance.
What about public nuisances in general?
It's posted both ways, so you can do it. It's posted both ways.
So again, back to those 6 inspectors, and then hearing from y'all, I think we need to do more. So I think our plan is to try to hire 2 additional employees, have 8, and do something different. Come back every day and start entering into our system that you approved, our new computer software, and start every day, which hopefully it won't be real time, but we could get it posted by the next day. Everything we wrote up the previous day, put it online, give the address, what violations were found, what actions were taking, meaning you have to continue to update it. Did they abate it? Did we go clean it up? Did we file charges? When did we file charges? But post that online or in our system every day. And again, we may be one day behind, but that's our plan. We know we need to ramp it up. I think y'all are interested in seeing more. Our inspectors work very hard, I can tell you, out there in the elements every day. They do a really good job, but it's not as easy as people think because, again, you have to give people notice. They have an opportunity to abate it. So there's, a good 10 days to 14 days right there by the time you start it and give them that opportunity. And then if they don't do it, sometimes we can go clean it up, or sometimes we have to hire a contractor. That takes a little time. So, but we ought to be able to post that information every day, and where citizens can go look at where are we in the process. They don't think we're not doing anything.
Is there anything that we as a council can do to fast track some of these cases that we know we're having problems with? It's just frustrating seeing some of these things sit out there for 2 years and try to explain to the citizens that we're working it.
Yeah.
But you can't see anything.
Yeah, when you have court hearings, for example, Mr. Boone mentioned where they don't show up 3 times. I mean, that's problematic. The council could say, look, you don't show up 1 time, you give people the benefit of the doubt. They may have emergencies and so forth. Maybe the second time, that triggers starting this process where we come and try to get the council to declare it a public nuisance. You could do that, try to speed it up. We're open to other suggestions. We don't like seeing this either. There are a lot of people that work with you. In some cases, again, there's the percentage that don't do anything or very little.
Thank you. Councilmember Getz.
You know, when I was practicing law, if you didn't show up in court, there were consequences. Now, I understand this is municipal court, and Judge Lively is not able to inflict the same consequences that a county court judge or a district court judge can do. But I like your idea that you just mentioned. You know, if they don't show up once, okay, maybe something happened. But that second time, I think it's, you know, go ahead and trigger the start of the declaration of public nuisance process. I think that's a good idea.
If it's okay with council, we'll start doing that.
I agree with that as well.
And there's that, I don't know what it is, 10% or so. We know where some of these locations are. We'll go through this process, and that's why we're here recommending it. We agree. At the same time, it could be back like it is in a matter of a month or 2, and we just have to stay on it and continue maybe to come and make this recommendation again and again.
Well, we're trying to help the ones that want the help. I mean, like this specific case here where, I mean, volunteers went and cleaned it up, but then you turn around and it's back in the same situation. I mean, we can't allow that for the neighborhoods to continue on.
Mayor, speaking of consequences, when you fail to appear in municipal court, there are consequences, and in this case, there is an arrest warrant has been issued for his failure to appear in municipal court.
But the arrest warrant was issued after the 3rd no-show?
It's probably after the first.
After the first no-show?
Yeah, you don't show up, failure to appear will be issued, and then other settings will be.
Okay, great.
Mayor?
Councilmember Durio asked, and then I'll come back to you, Councilmember Getz.
Manager, at the point that we are now, where this person has been ticketed, hadn't showed up, and we're declaring it a public nuisance, what's gonna happen now that we declare it a public nuisance, if we do? What'll happen?
I'll defer that to the city attorney.
Well, the ordinance that you the ordinance that's before you speaks to authorizing the city attorney to file a case in the district court to have the nuisance abated. And that either we will do it and charge it back to his property, or if he's ordered to do it, you know, he'll have an opportunity to do it. But
Do we do it where we put a lien on the property?
we will put a lien, we do place a lien on the property.
And if it comes down to that, that's another long process. We approve it today, and then, when you send it to district court, I imagine that's gonna take a while to get to the point where we can abate it ourselves and put a lien on the property.
There's a process.
Okay. And in the meantime, they can, if they come through and say, decide to clean it up, then everything just goes away.
If they decide to clean it up. Okay. Typically, the court will give them a certain period of time to do it themselves. And if not, then, and most times they'll ask for additional time.
Guy like that in my ward, in my neighborhood, he's not shown at court a couple of times. And the thing about it, he's just a renter that's keeping stuff there, and we've told the owner about it.
It happens.
Councilmember Getz.
Mr. City Attorney, you talked about an arrest warrant. Is this a Class C misdemeanor offense?
Yes.
So we know that the sheriff is not taking anybody into the jail for currently for Class C misdemeanor offenses, as I've heard her say, because of COVID. So when you have an arrest warrant like this, is this the type of warrant where it only is served if the police happen to have some interaction on another matter, or do they actually go out and try to serve the warrant on them, or how does that work?
I'm not a police officer. I don't know how that works. I just know that a warrant is issued, an active warrant is issued in his name, and
Okay.
it happens as it happens.
Typically, my understanding is that you know, for a Class C, you know, the police aren't going to go out and try to serve a warrant on something like that. So,
Well, we do have warrant rodeos when they actively go out, and, you know, it just depends on the circumstance.
right. So, anyway, so.
Councilmember Neal?
Thank you, Mayor. Back to what Councilmember Durio was talking about. So assuming they go clean this property up, it's gonna be just a matter of time before we see it again. One of the things that I would like to see is if we could not look at these city ordinances to see what we could do to kind of strengthen them a little bit, give us more teeth on making sure these repeat offenders don't continue to come back.
Is that something, Mr. City Manager, that we would need to either do?
We can look at them. Typically, these nuisance ordinances are enabled by the health and safety codes, and we primarily just track the language from those codes. But we can look at them and see where, if anywhere, we can tighten things up.
But you know, usually it's usually the same people
And we know where they're all
over
at.
and over.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, any other discussion? Thank you. So all in favor of approving item number 9, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carry. Okay, we have a discussion item. Mr. City Manager, can you please take us into the discussion item,
Okay,
please?
the discussion item is to review and discuss various building codes adopted by the city council and the permitting and inspection process. And this was requested by Mayor Mouton and Councilmember Turner. This is Lindsay here, and I don't want to steal your thunder. You can look at all those codes which are adopted by you, the city council. And Boyd Myers in the audience, our chief building official, and this is a part of the Planning and Community Development Department, which Mr. Boone is over. So glad you requested this. Please ask all the questions you may have, because the city gets blamed quite a bit for holding up construction, being maybe difficult in some cases. I will tell you, those are the codes you adopt. Once you adopt them, our job is to enforce them. And there are areas where our staff is making an interpretation and working with the legal department. We don't always get it right, believe me. And then when we don't, someone can appeal to a board that you appoint to hear that. It is easier, just let me finish this. It is easier probably to go build something in some of the surrounding cities around Beaumont. A lot of those cities haven't adopted these codes, and the ones that maybe have, they might have one inspector, without naming names, in some area cities within 10 miles of, Beaumont. They may have one inspector or two. We have inspectors for all the different trades, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, you name it. And so, yes, we're out there trying to do the proper inspections, and we struggle quite a bit where we sit down and talk about how can we make it easier to do business in Beaumont. If you submit plans that are correct, you normally get them back within 10 to 14 days. If you were to go to Houston, you're going to wait for 3 or 4 months or longer to get your plans approved. So it's a trade-off. We do offer every Thursday morning where if you sit down with staff, they'll have representatives from the water department, the fire department, fire marshal's office, where you sit down and go through what's required. And it does cost money, as Mr. Proctor stated, and sometimes it's expensive. If people can hire the right engineering firm, architectural firm that know what they're doing, they're going to submit plans that are probably 90% correct or close to where you can get them, submitted and return back. When you try to do it yourself or you hire someone that's not maybe reputable, you're going to have problems. And we need to talk about that today. Again, ask any questions you have. Sometimes we sit around and even go as far as, what if we didn't have these codes? And it was pretty much wide open. We don't really want to get in your business. You go hire a professional. We wish they could go hire a professional that signs off on it and they'd be responsible. But the first time you have an injury, a fire, what do people do? Did they build it to code, and who gets blamed? The city of Beaumont gets blamed, no one else. Councilman Samuel and I, when we were riding around today, we drove by a house that literally collapsed on itself to the ground. It was a 2-story home over here in Charlton Parlor, just collapsed to the ground. I don't know, we're trying to figure out.
Next to a school.
Yeah, next to a school across the street. So we have an obligation, especially if the council adopts these codes, and it affects a lot of things. It affects insurance rates in the city of Beaumont, which depend on what codes are adopted. For example, how many fire hydrants do we have? How many fire stations do we have? What are our response times within the fire department? That all goes into a rating that affects insurance rates for homeowners and for residential homeowners and also business owners. So there's a lot at play here. But again, I appreciate y'all asking. It's easy to blame the city of Beaumont when something's held up. Man, they're holding me up. I can't get an answer. Well, 90-something% of the time, when y'all check into it, and y'all do, you listen to a citizen, and then you have to say, well, I hear you, but let me get the other side. Well, the other side is they didn't submit the proper plans from the beginning, or they hired someone that's probably not skilled enough to interpret these codes and know what they're doing. And they're difficult. Look how many there are. There's probably 10 of them right there, and some of them are this thick. So I wanted to state that up front and just tell you, challenge us, ask all the questions you want. We can answer them or tell you why something works. Sometimes from the outside looking in, it's like, man, that's pretty burdensome. Sometimes we're required by either federal or state law to do certain things. Other times it's because the council's adopted these various codes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And just echoing that, this is, we think, a good opportunity to share our process, which is a complicated process. I mean, not even to get into the code books, of course. We don't have the time here, but it is a complicated process. We're always looking for ways to improve that process. So I would encourage y'all to, as we go through this, or even afterwards, always feel free to reach out, ask questions during this. Feel free to stop me. And again, there's always room for improvement. There's no doubt. It's just a matter of, how do we're charged with enforcing these codes and ordinances for a variety of reasons we'll talk about here. But there's always room for improvement. So, but with that, codes, why do we have them? I'm going to start at the beginning. Almost as old as cities. This is Hammurabi's code. You may recognize it from an eye for an eye, but rule number 229 is if a builder builds a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he has built falls and kills the owner, then the builder should be put to death. Okay? We're not that stringent. That's 1772 BC, so about 4,000 years ago. The Bible has a code in it as well. It just says put up a parapet wall on your roof so if somebody falls off, you're not to blame. Okay, so more seriously, codes, why do we have them? Probably first and foremost, it's safety. I would say most homeowners, people investing maybe in the biggest investment that they have, their home or their business, they may not have the knowledge to know what is safe, what is proper to move forward with that investment. We all know what happened in Florida this summer. That was under a code back from the 70s and 80s, so it was built to code, we believe, but all that will come out in the coming years probably. We don't have many building collapses in the United States because we have the codes we have. The picture in front of you, I believe, is in China. Nightclub fires, we still have them from time to time, but we don't have as many, or they aren't as extensive as maybe they once were in the United States because of the codes we have. So again, I think first and foremost is safety. Moving on, again, as I mentioned before, investing in a community, whether it's local, an individual with a home, or you've got a international corporation that's going to invest in our community. They're going to expect that that investment meets certain codes and expectations. And then again, standards. So if you have, whether it's somebody local or from another community nearby, from out of state, everybody needs to play by the same rules. So again, it's standardization. I won't go through all these, but these are the international codes adopted. We've got many of them here. Residential, building, existing, fire, energy conservation. That one I'll point out because, again, energy conservation sounds like something that, why are we doing this? Well, one reason is the state of Texas says we have to do that. So we've adopted the International Energy Conservation Code. Property Maintenance Code, that we use that for a variety of reasons. International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, National Electric Code, ICC standard windstorms. So,
Chris, there's a 2015 International Building Code and a 2015 International Existing Building Code.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between those?
Right. So if you have the primary international code is for new construction, but if you have an existing building, you're able to refer to that code, which allows some more discretion. And some variation in terms of how to deal with it. Because if you took, say, for example, Hotel Beaumont and said, okay, comply with the international code, it's not going to do it. So you've got to have some way, got to have some way to basically keep that building operating and functioning without having to comply to the modern code. And again, we've all seen this photograph from Hurricane Ike on Bolivar. This was the newest house built to the newest code in that subdivision, that addition on Bolivar. Why do we have codes? Again, I mentioned some of these are mandated by the state of Texas and FEMA. These are the codes that are mandated by the state of Texas. Again, most of those are reflected here. And then, as the manager mentions, ISO. What is ISO? It's the Insurance Service Office, and that organization helps to set insurance rates. And so they come to us every 5 years, and they do a pretty extensive audit. And they're going to ask, do you have the latest codes adopted? How many inspectors do you have? How many inspections do they do on a given day? What kind of training do they have, et cetera, et cetera. And so they give us a score sheet. And based on that, they give us an ISO rating, which can affect our rating and insurance in our community. What agencies, departments have codes that they need enforced as a permit goes through the process? Of course, the city has building codes. We have a flood ordinance. We have zoning and platting requirements. Of course, there's a fire code, public health, water and water quality, engineering and signs, but then we also interact with other agencies. So TxDOT, we have to interact with them, especially with curb cuts. Drainage District 6, drainage is always an issue, so we work with them to make sure that things are designed properly. TABC and liquor and permits. And then state of Texas, windstorm. And if we want to participate in windstorm pool at the national level, we've got to comply with those codes. And then, of course, the American with Disability Act, ADA codes, those are required, of course, by the federal and state entities. So what are some common permitting issues? The manager alluded to some, and that's right on, is the biggest issue, of course, is any kind of work starting without a permit. So without checking with zoning or permits or building codes, that's always an issue. As the manager mentioned, we have a lot of smaller cities in our region. We have, of course, rural areas maybe that are outside a city's jurisdiction that may fall into a county's jurisdiction. And as the manager mentioned, they may have adopted a lot of these codes, but they may not have the staff to fully enforce them. I'm not calling them out or knocking. I'm just saying if you work in that setting, you may be used to a certain level of compliance that we don't have here. And then I'll go ahead and say restaurant and bars are probably our most common issues, especially in shopping centers. And the reason being is I think people, and again, these are not national chains, because if a national chain comes in, they've usually got an architect and engineer from Dallas or whatever. They come in, we almost never have issues with national chains. But if it's a local, again, I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying they're focused on opening a restaurant. So what's their menu going to be, their kitchen equipment, fixtures, things like that. That's what they're looking at, let's say in a blank shopping center space. What they haven't been thinking about is, do I have a grease trap? Do I have a floor sink? Do I have 2 compartment sinks? Do I have all the things that are normally needed to open that restaurant?
Mr. Boone?
Yes.
Do you prefer if we ask the question when you get to a certain item, or do you want us to wait?
You feel free to ask questions if you'd like, as we go. It's fine.
Out of curiosity, is it a much longer process so we can ask them all at once with the presentation?
It just depends, I guess, how many questions. But
I don't want to. You know how that goes when we start asking questions. We don't get through it. So I think
I'd ask them as they, they come up and you.
All right.
Yeah.
and that was one of the reasons why I asked, because it was, if you go to the slide before when you stated projects that start before zoning is checked or permits are secure.
Right.
There are a lot of calls that I know of, whereas people will start a project without getting a permit, and then once the inspector goes out and then you're halfway there, you haven't gotten a permit, and then you're cited for it, and like the city manager said, then they're saying, the city messed me up on my project, or the city messed me up on my job. So could you please entertain, the procedure as to that, to the permitting?
Yes, ma'am. And I'll go through the permitting process here in just a minute.
Okay.
But you're right. It's when things get started. And again, our biggest issue is expectations, kind of knowledge of what all is involved. And again, we expect that maybe a small restaurant, we don't expect them to know all this. And we're not saying you've got to have some big city architect and big city contractor come in and do the work. That's not what we're saying at all. It's just sometimes there's a disconnect between what's needed and what they think is needed. And so the biggest issue with us is expectations and communication. And so I'll go through a little bit here how we've tried to bridge that gap as best we can. Because at the end of the day, one thing you'll hear me say again and again is, please call us early and often. Because the sooner we can have that conversation, and again, we'll say it, even if it's on your idea is on a napkin, that's fine, because we would rather talk to you early than late. Because when it's late, money's been spent, investments have been made, and it's not good for anybody.
Well, just last week we had a situation with a builder that used some wiring that was from the 70s and had put all of the insulation, all of the sheetrock up, and then no one called for an inspection.
I'll delve real quickly into it. It was and again, this is a big city developer, actually Harris County. But anyway, yes, they had come in and were ready to close on a house, and they had called for an electrical inspection back in May, and was denied because they had used a product that had not really been used since the 1970s, and was not really. If you look in the International Residential Code, it says no. In the current NEC, the National Electric Code, it says no. The new codes, I believe it says yes, but you've got to do A, B, and C. Well, we were never able to inspect the wiring back in May. In fact, we denied. We said this wiring will not work. Well, fast forward from May to August. end of July, really, and they're calling us saying, well, folks are ready to move in on Friday. And it's like, well, it just puts everybody in a bad position. So now we scurried, and we are scurrying to figure out, okay, how can we make it work? And so the contractor, again, kind of new to the area, moving forward, he's got several other houses underway. I think, we'll work with him. It was just the two that we're kind of caught in the middle. So that's kind of maybe not that specific issue, but that's the kind of issues we get is people are ready to open Friday afternoon, cut the ribbon, and it's like, well, we still have some issues. So restaurant and bars, I think for the sake of time, I won't go into these slides. But again, how do we try to improve the situation? Going back, I would say about 10 years ago, under Mayor Ames, we started the one-stop permitting shop, and 311 is tied into that because we do inspection requests. And so before this, if you wanted a permit, especially a commercial, you had to go to the second floor, and planning and zoning would be in one office, and building codes would be in another office, and engineering would be over here, and so you'd have to take your plans around, and it just wasn't as efficient as we felt it could be. So we developed a one-stop permitting center where we not only have a single place where you can go for most permits, but we're able to route permits through it, and also communicate, I think, better between departments and divisions. Next, GIS and CityWorks. If you wanted to know what your zoning was, ownership, things like that, going back 10 years ago, you would have to come down to the city, and we would unroll paper plans and paper maps and figure it all out. Now with GIS, we have these maps that are online, and so you can really from anywhere look up what your zoning address, lot configuration is, etc. CityWorks is our new permitting. We referenced it earlier with regard to code enforcement. We have it in that division as well, but it's really been a great tool that we've implemented in the last year for not only building codes but planning and zoning, but also engineering, public health, or other divisions involved. And so it's hard to see that screen, but if you see that long list on I guess it'd be the right side of the screen, that's an example of things that have to be looked at and checked off for a commercial permit. And then if you look to the left of the screen, those are all sub-permits. So if you have a general permit, and then you have electrical, plumbing, mechanical, etc. So it's been a great improvement in terms of keeping all that straight. This is just a screenshot of CityWorks, the application screen. So an individual, a contractor, an engineer, an architect from here or anywhere can go online and apply for whether it's a planning case or a building case, or a building permit rather. Also, our departments out in the field can use the CityWork data, which is much more detailed, to see where floodplains are, where water lines are, where other cases are. So engineering knows what planning and zoning is doing. Building codes knows what fire is doing, vice versa in terms of permitting. Yes.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Yep.
So if I'm citizen number one, I'm going to the second floor, and I would like to change all of my windows out in my house.
Yes.
I just started changing my windows out, and inspector passed by and says, "Do you have a permit?" So I'm just saying I'm changing my windows out, and I don't know that I need to change my window. I need a permit to change my windows.
Yes. And if you're in a historic district, you should get a permit for the windows and a certificate of appropriateness to make sure that they're historically appropriate if you're in the historic district.
Well, historic district is everybody that lives over there know they can't even change
not always
the trim without going through coding. But I live in the Pear Orchard. I just want to change my windows out. So do I need a permit?
Yes.
Thank you.
But again,
Is there, I mean, if I want to change 2 or 3 windows, but if I'm changing every window, I mean, is there a minimum or?
so
Is there a
there,
point where you don't have to have a
Right.
permit?
yeah, there are exceptions in the code where you don't need a permit. So it's more like maintenance. So painting and tiling and, replacing a wood, rotten board here and there. Boyd, can you think of anything else? It's pretty minor. Tiling, cabinets, kind of minor stuff. But most work requires a permit.
Is the minor stuff, is it on the internet so people know the minor things that can actually?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Well, but if I'm changing tile in a 4x4 bathroom, I mean,
If you're changing the tile, then we wouldn't require you to get a permit, but if you start going into the electrical or changing out your fixtures, repairing any sheetrock, anything like that, then yes, you have to get a permit for that.
changing out a bath fixture, the faucet? Wow.
Not unusual to, I mean, it's not,
Wait, I'm okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. You just got my attention.
I know.
If I want to go down to Home Depot and change out the fixture in the sink in my bathroom, I got to get a permit.
Per the ordinance that was adopted in the codes that we go by, yes, sir, you do.
Well, everybody in this room has broken the law.
Oh my God.
Let's say you're replacing a tile in your bathroom, and you pull the toilet, and you put the existing toilet back, it's considered maintenance, and you want to put a new wax ring on or whatever because of a leak. That's maintenance, it doesn't require a permit. But once you buy a new toilet, buy a new sink, buy your fixtures, then it requires a permit.
And you say this was adopted in 2015, correct?
Well, we've had the plumbing code for way before, but the latest version is a 2015 code.
And a licensed plumber.
change out, to change out. I got to get a plumber to change out the faucet in my bathroom.
Well, that's why I asked the question.
So those are really good questions. And then what we ought to do, though, is if there's things that you can exclude things in the codes that you adopt that you don't think make any sense, if the city attorney in his office recommends, it's not going to create other issues for us, maybe with our ISO rating. So you can make local exceptions, and things, again, that don't make sense, you ought to try to take them out.
That's why
because we're going to all go to jail up here.
That's why it's important for this workshop.
And I think, Lindsay, we'll probably admit we don't get many permits to change out fixtures, and we're not really driving around looking for people changing out fixtures. It's
to follow them out of Home Depot and see what they're buying.
right. But if you ask me, what does the code say? That's what the code say. But as the manager said, I mean, we can write a local exception that says, you are hereby allowed to change out, fixtures. It's just we'd have to do a local exception. But the reality is we don't sell many permits for faucet replacements. Now, if it's a new house, if they're doing a lot of work, a new bath, new kitchen, then it would be part of that. So.
Okay, I have another question. If you're still working on your home from the last flood, you gave free permits. How long do those last? Until you complete the work, or do you need to go back and renew it?
If you can demonstrate it's still related to the project from the restoration from the flood, then it's still waived.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Question, Chris?
Yes.
Somebody asked a question about if you had to have a licensed plumber. I understood that you didn't have to have a licensed plumber. Like, as a citizen, I can pull a plumbing permit long as the work passes code. Is that true?
As long as it's your homestead and where you live. So the way the clerks do it is you have to provide us your driver's license. We go to Jefferson County Appraisal District. We make sure it is your homestead, and if it is, then you are allowed to do any work to your home by pulling a permit. If it is not your homestead, you are required to hire licensed and bonded contractors.
Well, I have a few questions written down, so I'm going to try to wait till you finish to see if you answer some before.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
So again, as I mentioned before, how do we improve the situation? Pre-development meetings, and again, improving expectations, communication. So this is actually a pre-development meeting from last week. You can see we've got a building code official, Mr. Jackson from Public Health is there. We've got our Chief Condina is there. We've got somebody from Planning and Zoning. And up on the screen, I think we have water and water quality, as well as the applicant. I believe it's a cookie store. And the idea is we started this about 10 or so years ago. Again, the idea is we want to meet with you as early and as often as possible to try and avoid surprises and expectations. So we do these every Thursday morning. We typically do about 3. With COVID, we actually, I think we have 7 staffers down with COVID or COVID quarantine right now. So we're doing a lot of this online or Zoom or MS Teams. So, but the idea is again is to get the applicants in so we can identify any potential issues early, so we have no surprises as we try to get closer to getting open. So how else do we try to improve the situation? Again, pro-development philosophy. I mean, in general, our job is to enforce these codes and ordinances, but with any codes and ordinances, there's always gray area, room for interpretation, not in every aspect, but in some aspects. And so we do our best. If there's a gray area, we try to err on the side of the developer, the builder, the homeowner. And again, the question was asking about is the information posted online. This is just one portion of a screenshot. And we have a lot of information posted online about what's needed. And again, with restaurants and bars being a kind of a common issue, we try to include as many of these checklists and flyers that we can get out as possible. And then as we talked about, some codes and ordinances can be eliminated. Some can have local exceptions. But state requires most international codes and windstorm. ADA is required. We talked about the flood ordinance. We don't have to have a flood ordinance, but if we don't have one, citizens cannot buy flood insurance. And we can lessen enforcement, but we are subject to ISO and FEMA audits from time to time. Again, I won't go through all of these, but this is a general overview of the permitting process. And again, just real quickly, I'll go through this as an example of a new restaurant. So what are the steps? New pre-development meeting, hopefully. Again, the problem is if they don't call us for those meetings, they tend to be riskier or have more issues. Submitting commercial new construction permit plans. What kind of plans do we need for a new restaurant? A ComCheck energy code worksheet. Again, energy code mandated by the state. We need a site plan. We need a landscape plan. Again, this is new construction. Civil drawings, foundation plan, structural drawings, drainage plan, MEP plans. Those are mechanical, electrical, plumbing, floor plan, architectural drawings, demolishing if it's for demolition for commercial structures, asbestos survey is required prior to demolition. So
the structural is the only thing that has to be sealed?
Boyd, do you have a second? Do you want to talk about the 5,000 square foot rule?
Yeah, depending on the size of the structure, we go by the State of Texas Architectural Board and the Engineering Board as far as their tables that they have for the size of the building. We also have in our ordinance that anything over 5,000 square feet or more is required to be engineered and or architectural drawings depending on what the occupancy classification is. Also, the State of Texas, both of their charts that they use for the Engineering Board and Architectural Board has steps that you take: occupancy classification, then they go to square footages, type of construction, whether it's combustible, non-combustible. If it's like an assembly occupancy where there's a lot of people, the restrictions get tougher and tougher. So we go by the state regulations, we go by the tables in our code books that we've adopted, and also it really depends on If it's existing or if it's brand new, sometimes we can go into the existing building code because there are trade-offs in there to where we can maybe help somebody get into a building. If it was a restaurant before and it's a restaurant again, sometimes we can, they can go in there without having, for example, sprinklers. Sometimes if the occupancy classification was more than 100 people before, it can be grandfathered in. Sometimes otherwise, they might have to put a sprinkler system in. So there's several areas that we have to, a checklist that we have to go by to determine what they would be required to do.
So for any facility less than 5,000 square feet, you're not requiring stamped MEP drawings?
Well, to go further into it, all assembly, educational, and institutional occupancies, all plans are required to have architectural and or engineered drawings. And as far as the others, again, we have to go by that chart. But in our ordinance, we have anything over 5,000 square feet is required to be designed by a professional, whether it be just an engineer or an architect and an engineer. And that's in chapter 24 of our code of ordinances that that is current.
And that's residential and commercial?
That is residential also, correct. If you have a house that's over 5,000 square feet, a living area, then we require an engineer and or architect to be involved to have sealed drawings.
Thank you.
Okay, so these are the plans we would need to apply for the permit. So during the plan review process, what are the different divisions and departments looking for? Again, planning and zoning is looking at zoning, flood, setbacks, landscaping, sidewalk, sign. I note on the zoning, you know, if you miss a deadline for planning and zoning, you may have to wait another month. And, you know, we're asked from time to time, well, hey, can we hurry that up, or can we get it on the next agenda? For a lot of things or cases types, the state requires a 15-day notification. We've got to put it in the newspaper. So because of notification reasons, we cannot, you know, kind of add certain things to the planning and zoning agenda. Water department, they're looking for things like plumbing plans, sinks, floor drains, tie-in to grease traps. Fire department is looking for sprinkler system depending upon the size, occupancy type. Fire alarms, fire suppression hood systems. Building codes is looking for codes, of course. Comm check, windstorm. Health department, plans for plumbing, hand sinks, and floor drains. DD6, drainage, is looking for drainage plans, of course. Engineering department looks for civil drawings, drainage for compliance with parking, driveways, ADA, and other chapters of the ordinances. And then other agencies, again, TxDOT, I mentioned, they review driveway permits on state maintained areas. And then next, in terms of the process, you know, plans to review often have markups that need changes, so we have to wait for revisions to move forward. Once the fees are paid and the permit is issued, we kind of move on to the plan review and construction process. Again, we've looked at this screen again from CityWorks. It's just a long list with a lot of things that and a lot of different departments and divisions have to check off. And then next you begin construction. So let's say the general contractor can then start getting with their subcontractors, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, to pull their permits. So this on that same screen as mentioned earlier, we've got the sub permits that are off to the left associated with the main permits. And again, in terms of inspections. These are inspections that would be conducted during the course of the construction, foundation, frame and wall, ceiling, cover, and final, electrical, temporary pole, rough end, pre-final, and final. These are all steps that have to be done. Plumbing inspections, including rough end, water, sewer line, top out, and final. Mechanical, including rough end, duct cover, refrigerator, coolers, and final. Fire inspections, health inspections, including final, water quality inspections that would look at things like grease trap or sample wells, manholes, backflow preventers. Landscape inspection and zoning would include, of course, landscaping. And civil inspection would be driveways, grading, site cleanup, ADA, sidewalks. So those are all just inspection steps for a new construction project. Then once all those have been taken taken care of. We are looking for an energy code certificate to comply with the energy code, windstorm certificate to comply with windstorm, and then of course with it being a restaurant, we're looking for the health food certificate. And once all that's done, then we have our CO issue. So it's not pretty, but that's the process. And with that, are there any questions?
I'll go first. Okay. I was real patient. Thank you, Chris. You did a great job.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So is it the city of Beaumont, let's just say when you get I think it's 7 phases, you got to wait for inspections. I think a thing that often investors complain about is you have to be there from 8 to 5 to wait on engineering. You have to be there 8 to 5 to wait on electricity. You have to be there from 8 to 5. You know, an investor, a business owner, that's a long time to tell them pay somebody to sit there to wait on, somebody to come. I think it'll probably be better suited if we can give them maybe a shorter time block, or we'll come between 2 and 3. I think that'll be a lot more, reasonable for investors, some scheduled time versus telling them be there from 8 to 5. I've been in a situation before in the past, and having to be there for 8 to 5 when there's so many other projects you have going on, that can be kind of strenuous. So, I mean, is that something that is it standard or something that can be addressed? I think it would be a good option to let it be more structured.
We can certainly look into it. And I get it. I know it's like calling the cable guy and you have to wait half a day. And what we try to do, I think, is have some direct communication with cell phones between the inspectors, so we could look at seeing it. We could ramp that up. We do have a limited number of inspectors, and sometimes you say, okay, I've got 10 inspections today, no problem. I can kind of break that up into hours. But if you have, let's say your second inspection of the day is an apartment complex and you've got to do 20 units, it's going to slow you way down. But I think we can look in to see, whether or not that's a possibility to try and, shrink that time frame down.
They give you 4-hour window now. It's not 8 to 5.
Yeah,
If you
that's
call
right.
tonight, you can get a tomorrow morning inspection sometime between 8 and noon.
Yeah. And I still think the 4-hour window, I would like to see it be a little bit more, maybe an hour basis, because like I said, you can have an investor in from out of town, and that's a stretch, if they're driving 4 hours back to Austin, or, that's a stretch to tell them you need to be here from 8 to 12.
Right, yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's something often I kind of got from different people who invest in the city of Beaumont. I just think that's something we can look at, see if we can decrease that timeline.
Can I interject on that? How many inspectors go out per day?
So we have 8 plus construction inspectors. Mm-hmm.
Yes. One plumbing inspector?
43 inspections one day last week. He did the whole entire city by himself.
Why?
Because my other inspector is out on knee surgery.
So we only have 2 plumbing inspectors
Yes, ma'am.
for the whole city?
We have 2, yes, ma'am. We have 2 for each category. So you have 2 building inspectors, 2 electrical inspectors, and then your plumbing and mechanical inspectors, they're dual combination inspectors.
And then we have a planning and zoning inspector that would go out for that review.
Another question, when we're doing inspections, like let's just say we go out and one of our inspectors approves a particular project, and then we have someone else come out and say, well, this can't happen because of A, B, C, D. Do these inspectors have a checklist that they all go by their standard, so we don't have one inspector saying one thing and another inspector saying another?
So all the inspection steps, like rough in, top out, all those are distinct inspections. So when you call for that, a single inspector is going to go out and they're going to approve or deny that inspection. So there shouldn't be any follow-on. No one should go back on that prior inspection and say, well, so and so approved that, but I'm going to now deny it. Now, not to say those systems aren't connected, like we talked about the wiring issue before, where You know, they might be connected and related. So you may have gotten an approval for this stage, but when you get to final or some other stage, it's like, well, there are issues in between that we can't approve the system for.
On an average, how many inspections are done in a day, on an average?
On an average with all the inspectors,
Yes, per inspector.
per inspector. Electrical normally have about 25 to 27. Plumbing and mechanical on a normal basis probably has, about what, did you say 25 to 30? And then building usually averages about 15.
Okay. Thank you.
And in a normal day, that's a lot, but they do a great job and they get them done. As mentioned, as Lindsay mentioned, we do have some folks out for some medical issues, and then we do have several out with COVID issues. But we're making it work so far.
When we run into an instance like how we have some out, and it seems like a lot on some of them, do we have like maybe like temporary employment, or like someone that could come in and assist?
The short answer is no. We are looking at a private contractor called Bureau Veritas. They're an international company, but they're based out of Houston. So we've talked to them about possibly coming in. It's just they are very expensive, and it may be that we could see if there's somebody out there who maybe is retired or something that may could work on a contract basis or something. We could look into that as well.
So we said we don't have an instance where, someone can possibly approve something and another inspector comes back and says something different. But if it is a case that where it's something like that, as a city, where are we at? What do we do when we have something that's approved and we have to come back and correct it? Especially in an instance where you might have an investor may have put money into a project already. So how do we go about it then?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any instance where an approval was revoked later. I'm sure it's happened at some point, but I'm not familiar with any specifics. Again, there may be something that happened after that caused a denial, but I'm not familiar with anything where another inspector came back, or that inspector came back and said, well, I was wrong. We're going to fail that prior inspection. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah,
Not saying it hasn't happened.
Like an example, one electric guy might come in and say, you need an outlet right here, right here, right here. And that may take a day for the investor to actually get the outlet in the places he requested. Then you might have another one come back out the following day. And the right here, right here, and right here turns into, this right here too. So that's a thing that I have got from people who invest in the community, and I think that's why I said maybe a standard something in notation to whereas if you, the second inspector, you're coming back to inspect what the guy actually approved, not making it could come off like you're looking for more things.
Yeah, and I am familiar with one instance where I think normally you should have maybe at most 8 to 10 circuits, outlets on a circuit, and they had like 15 or 18, and I know that was an issue on one, and so there's always the potential for somebody to go out and say you need one fewer outlet, and then another inspector come in and say, well, I think you need 2 fewer outlets. But usually because there's one inspector for that inspection, you don't really have that back and forth. The issue can come, though, is if you had Inspector A, like we were talking earlier about the houses. Inspector A went out back in May and failed it. Well, Inspector B goes back out and may fail it for something else, but still have the issue, going back with the original fail. That never got rectified. But again, usually it's one inspector for one step, so usually don't have too much back and forth, but not to say it couldn't happen.
Yeah, because normally if it happens in that instance, you don't want an investor to ever feel like, it's targeting or picking. That's how they can come off. But in an instance, I know it's not the case, but when an instance like that happens, that's how some of them can feel in most cases. So I think it's good if a second investor's coming, a guy can be out sick, and you have another guy come in and do the inspection. I think it's key to make sure they actually pay attention to the notes that the first Yeah.
Yeah, and again, with anything, any of our codes and ordinances, that's why, Boyd and I are in the office, Lindsay's in the office. If you feel like there's some kind of discrepancy, some kind of issue, we're gonna ask questions. We're gonna look at the code, just like the issue with the electrical. We're gonna look at the code. In some cases, we'll call the code council, which is the international group, and say, hey, what is your interpretation? What are other cities doing? So we're always open. If there's an issue with the back and forth, that's why we're here. Yes, sir. Sure.
Real quick regarding that, just so you know, our electrical inspectors, our plumbing inspectors, mechanical, they're required to be licensed on the state level, just like your licensed electricians, your licensed plumbers. They're on an equal playing field. They've all been out as electricians out in the field. Our plumbing inspectors, some of them got 20, 25, 30 years experience as plumbers. And they have to maintain their state license. They have to have a state inspector's license that they have to go to take a test. They have to actually go to Austin and take the test. So they've been out there in the field and they've done that. And what I recommend, if a situation like that happens, is that state licensed electrician get with our state licensed electrical inspector, get together, get in the National Electric Code Book, and say, okay, last time you were out here, you told me that these outlets were enough. Okay, where in the code book does it say that I have to add 2 more? Or where does it say that I've got 2 overloaded circuits? And whether it's in our adopted ordinance or where we have this is a maximum amount of circuits allowed on a 15 amp or on a 20 amp circuit, this is how many outlets you can have. Or sometimes there's, on the rough end, there's no countertops. And the way the code reads, you gotta have an outlet so spaced so far apart on the countertop. Once the countertops are in for final inspection, you go in and I got a countertop over here, there's no outlets. And the guy said, well, you passed the rough end inspection. He says, well, on the floor plan, on the house plan, we looked at it and there's no counter there, but the homeowner came in and said, or the builder said, you know what? I'm gonna put a counter right here. And they added it and they came in on the final and they're like, well, there's no outlets. Well, you passed the rough end inspection. That's not my problem. And you're like, well, no, wait a minute. The electric code says that you have every 2 feet from the end wall and then every 4 feet after that, you have to have an outlet. So that sometimes it happens like that, and I recommend that our inspectors, whether it be plumbing, electrical, or mechanical, call our inspector. We'll open up the code book, and I'll do it as well if I'm available, and we'll discuss it and work something out. And if they can't work it out and it just begins to be a problem, sometimes it goes all the way to the appeal process, to where they want to go before the Construction Board of Appeals and say, look, I disagree. This is wrong. I think I need an interpretation from a board, and then we can take it that far. But that very seldom happens because we can usually get in the code book, discuss it between all of us. Sometimes we'll go to our director, Chris Boone, and we'll talk about it. We'll figure it out, and we move on. And that's what I recommend that we do, and then that way we can resolve things and move on and not try to, hold up the project.
But most of it is, like you say, you have people that have been doing it for 25 years, and most of it is to code anyway. So they're going to know right off the bat,
Yes, ma'am.
if they're looking at the prints, that so many feet, you have to have those outlets.
Thank you. And I know you said earlier, when we look at and review plans, we're looking at roughly hopefully a 2-week turnaround. I'm not sure about other cities, but like, is it like something we have that we want to make sure we don't exceed those 14 days?
Yes. So our goal for commercial is 2 weeks. So 10 days in terms of business days. But that's our goal to get turnaround. Because again, we don't want to be the holdup. And again, I think the process with, yes, the computer is a great tool, but I think most of it is, we have a great staff, and I feel like our divisions and departments work together, very well. And so, and again, communication with the client and the builder and the contractor and the developer, I think that's the key for it being better. But yes.
Is this something different from residential? Is it still 10 days with residential?
We try to do it quicker residential, a week. Yeah.
7 days?
5 days, 5 business days. We
5
try to,
business days.
yes. That's the goal.
Okay.
When we have a correction, do we have like a standard response time? Let's just say if something needs to be corrected, do we get back with a caller within 24 hours, or do we try? Like, do we have something in place to where we make sure we can communicate effectively, timely?
Lindsay, do you want to talk a little bit about the new system? This is our CityWorks expert, and Lindsay, she did a tremendous job in getting us where we are. Especially with COVID happening, we had issues with, we kept the office going, and we were able to continue issuing permits and inspections. It never slowed us down, but this computer system is even better because now people can submit plans and all that. So she did a tremendous job with that. But
Thank you. So going with revisions, I've developed a tab in the CityWorks that says revisions itself. They submit the revisions online. They call us, let us know, hey, I got the revisions that you needed. We attach it to the plans. The clerks manually go in and email all departments that it's for. We'll email Justin a lot, Ed Brown, Molly Villarreal, and let them know, hey, so-and-so submitted their revisions. Can you let me know? We email the applicant and say, hey, got your revisions. Thanks so much. We'll be in contact with you soon. Please check your portal for any updates. CityWorks has been amazing for our department. My staff loves it. I know engineering's getting used to it. They love it. Chris said 5 days for residential. We've been flipping out houses almost within 24 hours.
Oh.
Good.
So you submit a set of house plans. The clerks look at it, make sure they have all the plans that we need. We accept it. Automatically it goes to planning and zoning. Planning and zoning reviews it. They approve it. Automatically goes to building codes. Building codes approves it. In the meantime, engineering's looking at it. So within 24 hours, or sometimes there's been even less where we've had it approved within a couple of hours, you have a set of house plans ready to roll out the door. Contractors, it's a love and hate relationship. They love to hate it. They love to call me. I spoke at the, what's it called? Thank you, the Home Builders Association a couple of months ago. Brought them some great information, thinking about trying to do it for other builders that are not in that process and for citizens to come out to learn the CityWorks. Our main goal is to make Beaumont better. And when they contact y'all, letting y'all know, hey, the city's holding me up, they're telling me this, they're telling me this, they're telling me this. 9 times out of 10, most of y'all sitting here have called me and been like, hey, what's going on? How can we make this better for them? We'll get with Chris, we'll get with Boyd, we'll get with, I will go with whatever department you need me to make this work for you. I'm here for the citizens, I'm here for the contractors, I'm here for y'all, and I'm here to work. I want to stress that I always want the citizens or contractors, architects to call. We're always available. My name and number's online. Boyd's, Chris, that's what we're here for. But CityWorks has made it a lot easier for us, and I really hope that contractors and them start utilizing it more.
Lindsay, is there a tutorial that's available, or?
Yes, and we actually have a PowerPoint from the last meeting that I went to that I'm going to get with Angie and them to get it put online next week.
Oh, thank you. Great.
I think right now it's some vital information out here, and I think in the future it might be really well to do something similar to a business town hall, to where as you guys can let people in the business community know some of these ways that it's easier to communicate and update, because that'll probably eliminate some of the in-between with council members and you all. So I know that's something I would hope we can get some support from the council with, that in the future we can do a business town hall to get some of this good information out to everybody. And I think that could be a win-win for all of us, even hearing from some of them as far as to some of these codes that we can kind of help simplify to help us all. I think that'll be a good opportunity for everybody to kind of work together on this.
I have a question. How long does it take to adopt changes, code changes?
So the process, and we'll be starting it here pretty soon, to look at adopting the newer codes. You'll notice these are 2015, we're in 2021, and so you're saying, well, you seem a little bit behind. We don't ever want to adopt the newest code that's out there. Typically, you want to wait and make sure that
all the kinks are worked out.
Right, and so we don't want to be the first to adopt, and so you want to make sure that, and it's happened before where, you know, a certain year code, you'll hear from other colleagues in other cities, and they're like, we're not we're not going with that. We're going to wait, and they'll revise all the issues in that version. They'll revise the next, and then when you adopt that, it becomes less of an issue. But we will, we will start that process here pretty soon. And what we do is the first thing we do is we identify new changes to the code, so kind of key changes, and then we'll roll that out to the home builders, AGC, engineers, architects, trying to make sure they're all on board, and then we'll bring it to council for consideration.
Councilmember Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to kind of echo what Mr. Boone said, and I've seen it work firsthand on numerous projects, is the pre-development meetings, and just strongly encouraging people to take advantage of that. It's a great process, and it's very beneficial to the projects.
Councilmember Felshaw.
Thank you, Mayor. 3 questions, real quick. The Energy Conservation Code, I believe that's the same thing as the ComCheck Code worksheet.
Yes.
I've heard that, I'm assuming people come in from outside of Beaumont and they encounter this. Other communities around us perhaps are not abiding by that code, correct? We're not speaking about it, we're not naming the cities, but there are some that haven't really, they're not following that. But that code is a state law.
Yes, sir.
And we as a city are trying to follow that and set an example and abide by that, correct?
Yes, sir.
So just because a sister city may not be following that, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
Correct.
Okay. You said that inspectors, 15 a day, 25 a day, so average, let's say 20. I'm looking at the number of inspectors you mentioned. That's 2.5 inspections per hour. Do we just have a problem that we need to hire more inspectors?
Yes. Yes.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes.
If you're asking me, yes. We
Yes.
need more inspectors.
So we need to staff up to handle the workload that our city has at this time.
Yes, sir, because like Councilmember Turner said, that would allow us to give a more timely accuracy.
Okay. Third question. When we look at that, that's intimidating. You know,
That's not even all of them.
well, okay, so now I'm just terrified. But, it's intimidating. Less so, for some people like Councilman Neal, that he does this for a living. But for someone like me, I wouldn't know where to begin. So the question is, I guess, where do we begin to simplify the process? How do we even start that? To take out things such as an exemption that says, if I want to put in a faucet in my bathroom, I don't have to go pull a permit. How do we even attempt to start simplifying this to where we can accomplish what we all want for Beaumont, and that is to make it business friendly, where people say, Beaumont's a great place to do business. They got some codes in place that are there to protect the citizens, but it's common sense, and they have a common sense approach to it. How do we even begin that?
So again, I think feedback from y'all, and we can talk, and we've done that before. So we've talked about, for example, with a manager, say a 10,000 square foot building, does it need a sprinkler system? Are there ways to get around some of these more stringent codes? And I know, Mr. Meyer's been great about really digging into the code and coming up with ways that still abide by the code, but allow greater flexibility to get away with, having a sprinkler, certain things. And so I wouldn't advocate, going line by line through all these codes and trying to figure out what we need or don't need, because again, ISO, first thing they ask is what local exceptions do you have? And we're going to have to give them all that. And they're going to ask, well, why? Why do you have that local exception? And I think there's probably room in there that we could, use, for example, the faucet example. We could probably have some local exception, but I don't know that we want to go line by line. But if there are things that we come across that said, hey, this doesn't make sense, or this really doesn't make sense, we're, I think between y'all and us and any kind of input, we're open to
so together collectively we can make the exceptions.
The council can make any local exceptions that they desire. Yes.
But so the process would be, because we trust the city manager, we trust you and your staff, you guys, as you go through this and you come across these things like the faucet, you could bring this back to us and say, guys, listen, here's 10 items we think you guys could address and speak to, then we as a council could do it.
Yes, yes, sir.
So that could be the process, that y'all bring it to us, because again, I can't go through all of that. There's no way.
I don't think anybody can. That's a lot. That's overwhelming.
I guess the process, we look to you as you come across it, you highlight it and go, this is something we need to bring to the council.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. And again, we can, leaving out here, we can talk about, going through that process. And are there things that, and again, as mentioned on the faucets, we just don't sell many faucet permits, but we know there are plenty of faucets being installed. So does it make sense to not have that as an exception?
Well,
maybe we should have it. I don't know.
Okay,
At
Chris.
7 o'clock and your faucet goes crazy and you have to replace it. You can't. I mean, you're going to turn it off underneath, but still, you need to replace
You
it.
can stop a leak, yes. You
Yeah,
can do
no one's going to think, well, let me wait until Monday morning and go down and get a permit for a $149.59 faucet.
I'll give you an example. After the ice storm,
Right.
how many permits did we sell for plumbing repairs?
2.
So that's a common sense.
Common sense. How many leaks? How many leaks do we have?
Right.
10,000 maybe?
Absolutely. Well, that's something for us to work on.
Okay.
And that's why we wanted to bring this. Go ahead.
Okay, Chris, from a restaurant standpoint, let's just talk about someone who wants to do a restaurant from the ground up. Maybe they probably using their personal money, and you run into an instance where it may be in a shopping strip. You have an existing grease trap that another restaurant is already utilizing, and there you could test it and you see how much that they're actually utilizing. Why are we not allowing, tenants, if they agree on their own and provide it and show the city of Beaumont that they agreed to share a grease trap and they work out whatever type of deal? Why are we not allowing, an instance like that? Because a grease trap is a pretty expensive investment. If you have two businesses, they're small restaurants that's not utilizing to full capacity, they want to work something out to work together. Why do we not allow that?
Yeah, and again, I don't know if we have anybody in here from water quality, but there are calculations as to how big they have to be, whether or not they can share them, whether or not they can use a sample well. And I've just kind of overhearing, I've not been that involved in that process, but I've heard where they've been as flexible as they can be. It's just, it goes back to, why do we care in the first place? Well, we've got, we have issues with fats, oils, and grease, and it's that program that we're trying to rectify. But Boyd, do you have any thoughts, or Bart?
There is, I believe, a policy in place, and we can get a copy of that says a new restaurant or establishment is required to provide their own grease trap, but they would not be. There have been some cases where they've been allowed, like 2 smaller establishments in the past, but I believe it's in writing to where each establishment's required to tie into their own if it's new construction.
State law? Is that a state law?
No, it's local, I believe, and it might be, there may be some other requirements, but we can definitely get that information for you and get that for you. But the general rule is that we have been working with water quality control enough to where we've seen that they do require on the new construction that they provide their minimum 750-gallon grease trap and a sample for new construction.
So I noticed we said new construction. I'm talking a shopping strip, a small shopping strip. You may have 2, smaller restaurants. I understand new construction, but I'm talking on the levels of a shopping strip. You might have maybe a barbecue spot and maybe a seafood wing spot. Those are the more along the lines that I'm talking about, possibly exploring an option like that.
We have had a few recently that have requested or applied for a waiver where they only had to have a sample well in the beginning, and then they would go out for maybe once a month for 6 months and test and take samples to see how much grease they're producing, and then make a decision after that if they move forward, if they'd be required to provide their own or maybe another solution.
And when you have a grease trap and a sample well, is a manhole still required? Can you kind of explain that? Because a lot of people, I get questions about that, and I'd rather be able to know how to explain it properly.
I'll try. It really falls under Mike Harris, but the manhole's required because when it does plug up, we have to have that, or they have to have it in order to get that line cleared again. So the manhole's there for maintenance. If you don't have it, you have difficulty getting that line cleared. And sometimes that may be the only manhole for hundreds and hundreds of yards into that sewer line.
All right.
One other thing, can we come up with an exception book? Like some of the things we're talking about, changing out a wax ring and toilet wax ring and a faucet, between council and some of the things that you get in your office or that you come across that we could work on just for exceptions, and possibly once we all come together and discuss them with city manager and you, Mr. Boone, and council, then we could post it. Once we all agree on some of the exceptions, that we could post it on the web under city codes.
And we do have the local, I think the exceptions to permits on there, but to answer your question, yes, if I think we develop, a more extensive list, then we could certainly post that.
Great.
Let's start with, what are 3 or 5 things that y'all deal with that you think are burdensome? If you were on the other side, if you were out there trying to build something, construct something, or someone at someone's house, what doesn't make sense to y'all? Maybe we start with 3 to 5 items. Then we come back and have another work session. What code would you have to amend, and how so? And you know how we'll do it. We'll line through what we're proposing to take out, put in bold what we're proposing to add, and just maybe come back in 30 days, if not sooner, and say, hey, let's start with these 3 or 5 items, and just bring it to their attention and ask them to consider it.
Councilmember Durham, yeah.
These exceptions to the code, what type of effect will they have on the ISO ratings?
You got to look at them one by one, and city attorney's office would be involved, as well as water and fire marshal's office. Everyone that's involved in a particular code and enforcement would look at that, and we wouldn't make that recommendation if we thought it was detrimental.
Yeah, you don't want to do anything to compromise the health of the safety.
Right.
That's the bottom line. So that's what ISO looks at.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, now, thank you. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. Now is the time for any citizen that would like to speak on this particular item. No one? Okay. Does he have you have a form?
We're doing,
Okay, you can.
we're doing public, we're getting ready to go into public comments.
We're getting ready to go into public comment if you want to
Yes.
wait. Okay, thank you. Okay, I will close the floor. And we're going to have council comments at this time. Public comments, I'm sorry. Public comments.
James Eller, 2332 Avalon, Beaumont, Texas.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate on the vehicles. My guest had brought up about the military vehicles. You can actually look at them online and go for a public auction starting off at like $500. I found one starting off 1998 ones, 2002 models as well. They're APX, I think it is, something like that. But being that I have older vehicles, it's better to put a $1,000 engine in, a $1,000 transmission in, instead of buying a $185,000 brand new truck, right? So, I mean, if we need something like that, it'd probably be best suited to go online. Federal grants, there's different programs. I'm sending some information to some of the council about different programs, look into. Talking about the Texas occupations code 1301.051, it's no longer illegal for a homeowner to be a plumber. So Texas adopted in September 1st, I think it was 2019, where any homeowner can be their own plumber without any kind of license. So you actually are okay with replacing your faucet at the middle of the night without permits or without a license. You might need a permit for city ordinance per se, but beyond that, you can actually replace. But that brings a point to being a second homeowner. I am required to actually have a builder's bond that I spent $250 for that requires me to pick that up for a second house, even if I own that. Now, that's not me running a second house as a business, as a rental. It's just as me owning the house. So I can't do my own plumbing. I have to hire a plumber at a second home. And if we can get rid of that, I would appreciate that. That would save thousands of dollars of cost that's unnecessary. If I can replace a faucet at one home and do my own plumbing at my own one home, and I own a second home, I would still have to hire a plumber. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that I'm able to do it at one home satisfactory building, to what the city requires, but I can't do it at a second home that I own. So if we can look into abolishing that, that would be great. So I just wanted to bring that point to y'all. Appreciate y'all.
Deborah Featherline, 6770 Lexington, Beaumont, Texas.
Okay, I want to address something real quick before I get to the reason I came. This gentleman here gave some information that you had a question about. In July through November of 2020, I battled for my life with COVID. I recovered, my mom did not. In March and April, I received the Moderna vaccine. I was down for 2 weeks each time. It put me down that bad. In July, I went to a client's house that did not tell me her husband had COVID. I was exposed once again, tested positive. The difference is I was at home for 5 days with a fever. 6 days later, I tested negative. The vaccine does work. It does work. It does not prevent you from getting COVID 100%, but it will help you if you get it. That being evident by the only one person on a ventilator was vaccinated. The vaccine does not prevent everything. Nothing can. We don't know enough about this mess. But I just wanted to answer your question that you had from my personal experience. The reason I am here, I was not able to attend the homeless meeting you had, but I wish to put my face in front of you. I moved my business to Beaumont in 2015. Most of you know I'm right there at Delaware and East Tex Freeway. I am having a horrible time with the homeless. I have never locked the doors of my business, never. But I am now. I go in the morning, I lock both of my doors behind me, and I'll tell you why, and I'm gonna run out of time.
I'm going to give you some more time, Deborah.
I was standing, you've been to my shop, at my work table. I was covering a cornice board, and I use a pneumatic staple gun that shoots a 1/2-inch staple. A man opened my door and stepped in, and he said, "I need some money." I said, "Well, darling, you're at the wrong place. I don't keep money here." And he said, "I'm sure you do in your purse. I'm gonna give you about 2 minutes to take your hide back out that door." Well, he stepped toward me. I emptied my pneumatic staple gun at him. He put his head back in the door and said, "I hope you know you hit me with that. I hope you know I'm loading my nail gun now. Leave." I am now fully capable of doing much more than a nail gun if someone comes in my shop. But the homeless are living under Delaware and East Tex now. And I'm not a hard-hearted person. Miss Mouton, you know me. I'm not a hard-hearted person. I do not give them money for any reason. I donate money to some other place, and I donate money to the Salvation Army, because both of those people will help the homeless and they will feed them. But if anybody's listening to me, if you give a homeless person money, you are not helping them at all, and I have experience on that too. I lost my son for 10 years on the streets of Beaumont to drug, but he's been clean for 15 years now. One of the worst things you can do for someone on the street is give them money. And I see people that pull up to Delaware now, and they will actually tap on your window now if you pull up. I am asking council, I don't know what you can do. Please do something. Beaumont has been very good to me. I have enjoyed having my business at that location. We started out at the very end of the shopping center. Within a year, I tripled the space I was leasing. I am now a national company. I go all over the United States with retirement homes. And I am very proud to say my business is in Beaumont. I love the city of Beaumont, regardless of what you see on Facebook and all that garbage. I love living in Beaumont. In May, I lost my home to a fire in Beaumont. And the fire department was just absolutely the most wonderful guys I have ever seen. The inspectors that helped after that. Beaumont has a lot to offer. We really do. But if we don't get a grip on this homeless situation, it's going to be bad. Because no one's going to want to have a business where you have to buzz a doorbell to get in. I think that's rude. I have always said that was rude, and I cannot believe I now am in the position that that's what I have to do. The police have been there every time I've called. Every time I've ever needed them, they've been there. I have no complaint with the police department at all. I know when I was planning commissioner in Vidor, I passed some laws that I still get flack for. But we passed an ordinance where we made panhandling illegal in the city of Vidor. I know it sounds hard-hearted, but I would ask council to pass something similar to that, and it will move them away from the intersections and away from the businesses, as well as I read y'all's thing from the meeting. I read every word of it. We do need to do something going forward to offer these people help, because some people are homeless by no fault of their own.
True.
They're not worthless humans. A lot of them are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and a lot of them have emotional problems. I've talked to several that have just emotional problems. But we need to do something.
We have some information we're going to share tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Deborah.
Alto Watson, 2615 Gladys, Beaumont, Texas.
That's a tough act to follow. What the health director said was terrifying. I was wondering if it was because the news media is not here, if possibly the city council could maybe do a press release or to make the video of his presentation available to the press as soon as possible, because I mean, we're the #1 positivity rate in the whole state. That's terrifying. On another note, even though some people may like him, some people don't, we ought to have a moment of silence for the governor who has COVID. He's an incomplete quadriplegic, and he's exactly the kind of person who deserves some silence and some thought. I'm happy to see Audwin here. Thank you for getting better, Audwin. The city needs you. I'm glad to see you back in your chair. I'm glad to see that you recovered. You don't sound all that great, but you're here in spirit, okay? If we can spend $185,000 on a high lift truck, and we need it, obviously, there's no cost you can put on a human life, we should be able to spend $40,000 on a dog park in the west end of town for people to free run their dogs. Maybe you can put it in the park on Delaware because it's got all those great trees. But we need a dog park on the west side of town for people. Really, we don't have $40,000 for a dog park. I find that ridiculous. Lastly, thank you very, very much. It's my understanding there's going to be a workshop on the Battleship Texas. I think that's great. I think that if you want to get people interested in downtown Beaumont, you need to get people interested in downtown Beaumont. Let's have some vision. Let's have like I said before, let's have the Battleship Texas Water Park. You got all the water in the world down here. You could, you would think you would have that. Let's have the Battleship Texas Family Putt-Putt course to go along with that. You're right across the street from the police station. I don't know that you're going to have a whole lot of, issues with safety, and you might, but I mean, it's right here. But that's something that'll draw people downtown. That's a family-oriented thing. Instead of tearing down the building over here, turn it into a movie theater to show family-oriented movies only. You could spend the whole day in downtown Beaumont, Texas. You can go to the water park, you can go to the putt-putt, you can go to the Battleship, you can go to the movies. You can go to the new restaurants that are going to be built. That's my rant. Thank you for discussing the Battleship Texas. If, nobody wants a white elephant, but we all want a diamond in the rough. So, thank you.
Louis Vaughn, 9615 Mapes, Beaumont, Texas.
Mayor Mouton, council, manager, attorney. Couple items. Councilman Gett did bring up a good idea about the Battleship Texas. I know for sure, just restaurants, they got the best cooks around everybody's house. So you got to have something that'll attract people, bring them off of that freeway. I think his idea is good, or something like that. It has to be something that'll draw people here to Beaumont. So I'm in accords with that. If it's not the Battleship Texas, be something. Number two, the same amount of money that we are going to be paying for the increase of the garbage, we could have gotten from GGI when they approached us with $400,000 a year. We could have gotten that, and that's what it's going to cost us now. Again, here is the thing. If you look at the DVD from 12, 13 of 11, you will see that when you look at that, you'll see what they were saying to us. We could have had $40 million now. Watch this. That's quality of life. That would have been the lanyard, because you were taking care of all that methane gas and all of that that's at the landfill, and look what you've got. You got paid for doing that. Thirdly, I listened to a press boudoir talk about on the 4th of July, his message was about the Magna Carta, it was about the Constitution, it was about the Bill of Rights. I heard that and I'm saying, wow, wait a minute, that's quality of life. Then he went in and he said something. He says, hey, this is for everybody. Nobody is excluded. I say, wow. I would challenge you to look at that piece and look at that, what he did on the 4th of July weekend of this year. The press boudoir I'm speaking of, none other than Pastor Fairchild. He talked about that, and you need to hear that, because that's coming up again. Lastly, you all brought up about Amelia. Well, let me tell you something. Amelia was an intentional mistake. An intentional mistake. Sound like an oxymoron. But it was intentional, but it was a mistake, because they tried to do what God does. God knows what was coming on, but the people who intentionally did this didn't. In time to come, we'll talk about that. If you get another DVD from 8, 9 of 11, you'll see the beginning of this, how it all started. See, what happens sometimes, we don't understand and say, well, why would you talk about something that happened in 2011? Well, you have to talk about history to catch up to where you are. See, because when I heard all those people at the town hall meeting, they don't even know anything about Beaumont and how Beaumont got started and what happened. See, because there's two monies here. There's new money and there's old money. And Beaumont is like it is because of where it began. Because we got called the Golden Triangle. On only 3 water ports. Man, we could have had millions and millions of dollars. But guess what? The people that was in control say, no, we want it small. Do I understand that? Yes. But nevertheless, look at those DVDs that I suggested, and you'll see something. Thank you very much.
Thank
for giving
you.
that extra time.
Thank you.
Jerome Alexander, 1118 Avalon Street, Beaumont, Texas.
Good evening, council. How y'all doing this afternoon? I come in today because everybody be talking about the homeless people, the homeless. But we got a homeless problem for real. And they right here in my neighborhood. You know, they in everybody's neighborhood. When I'm saying they're under the bridge right there, I'm going out and talk to these people every day. I feed them, give them money out of my pocket. The lady say don't give them no money. But hey, they be thirsty. They need water. They do whatever they do, but I give it to them because they need it. But me and this lady, Miss Ruth and Miss April, we came with a program called Manager for Hope. And the program we trying to get is we need some land. All we need is some land. You out and give me some land, I got a contract I'm meeting in the morning at 9:30 at the Waffle House. He'll build a shelter. We might need some farms later on, but he'll build a shelter. They need a shelter for the daytime. That's why they're under the bridge. They don't got nowhere to go in the daytime. Some other place, they open at 8:30 in the morning. They close at 11 o'clock. If I got a job, I go to work in the morning at 7:30. I get off 3 o'clock. I ain't got nowhere to go bathe. I ain't got nowhere to shower. I ain't got nowhere to wash my clothes. They ain't got no avenue. They out in the sun. Salvation, they open at 5 o'clock. The feed, 6 o'clock, they let them go in. It's 50 people. They there for 30 days. Can't nobody else go there. After that, so where the other people go? If I go to work, I ain't got nowhere to shave. And I got to go back under the bridge. And then if I want to go to work, I ain't got nowhere to bathe. I might don't want to go to work because I don't want to be around these people because I smell bad. That's the problem. That's why they still under the bridge every day. When the Salvation Army closed, and they tell them in the daytime to leave, they have to go run the street. They have to go run the street. They hang out by the stove. They hang out by McDonald's. They go everywhere because they don't got nowhere daytime shelter to go nowhere. We got all this money, but y'all got all this free land, but nobody don't want to build a shelter. So I said, y'all give me some land, and I got some guys gonna build a shelter where they could be in the daytime, they could shower. And one thing, they don't have some other place they got a physical address. They don't have a physical address. So I got all these names right here. I've been from college to Delaware. All these guys need IDs and stuff. I'm going to take this to Mr. Keith in the morning in some other place so he can start the process. You got people that need medical attention. You got people that got stab infections. And when got this here, and the lady at Tan, she gave us, Miss Root, she showed us a way to put them through the computer, because I'm kind of computer illiterate, but she know, my coworker, she knows, but to put them online so they can get to the places they need to go. But every time they said they don't got no ID. Okay, some got food stamp cards. You can once you got the lady say, well, if they got a food stamp card, they can come, we can give them medical attention. But when we brought the guy the food stamp card, she said, well, you really can't use the food stamp. I said, well, the food stamp store is connected to our Social Security card. So if he got a food stamp card, you get a Social Security card, you're gonna know who he is. That way he'll be able to get an ID. Yeah, people got lost, they lost everything in fires and everything. And they been on the bridge, they can't get in the Salvation Army, so they go on the bridge. They don't got no ID. So I can't get a job, I can't get nothing. Everything we need for ID. This special thing y'all got for the Civic Center over here, for the homeless people on 24. They tell them they can't get nothing unless they got physical ID. So ain't nobody getting out here and getting with these people, sir. I'm telling y'all, these people got people willing to work. You know how I know? I go get them. And I take them to go do the same work y'all saying and we don't supposed to do it without the codes. I do it. Because they need money. They need to eat. I'm just being honest with y'all. This is what I do because they need to eat, man. They need on the street. They can make $60 at least. You can stay in a hotel room and bathe and go somewhere to the next day. I can't give them a job every day. But these people want to work. You got a man in a wheelchair right up there, bathes hair. Nobody told me he got one leg, Scooby-Doo, man. He said, look, I'll be a secretary. I can do this type of work. I just don't want to be in the position. But they don't got nowhere to go in the daytime, but on the street, under the bridge. If they had somewhere to go, shelter in the daytime, they can shower, they'll go to work. I know they'll go to work. I go get them.
Well, sir, thank you so very
Yes,
much.
ma'am. I appreciate y'all time.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'll be by the shop. You say, well, you take the freeway, I'm gonna stop the people coming by the shop, man. Thank y'all.
Brian Dunnigan, 1910 21st Street, Beaumont, Texas.
back to the code enforcement. My question is, say for example, a store owner goes to the city, brings his plans, they get approved, he goes back, spends a bunch of money to get the building going, comes down to the end, finds out the city's made a mistake, or the planning's made a mistake, and says, oh no, now your plans are no good. But it's been approved, but he's already went and spent X amount of dollars. Who's to be held accountable for what they made the mistake, but it falls back on the owner? That's my question: is who's to help be held accountable for that? That's what I need to know, because I'm going through that. Is why I'm here. I opening up a company. City stamps my plans, approves it. He's got a copy of it. He's got a copy of them, and then I get down to pour a driveway that's been stamped approved, and then they say, no, I can't have it. So who's to be held accountable? Second question is I do tons of volunteer work. I've traveled all over the United States for storm chasing. I know y'all have probably seen this picture on the TV, rescuing animals and people out of my own personal truck. That's how deep it was in the water that I drive. I just purchased, might get a divorce from it, but I just purchased a high-wheel truck, what they're talking about buying. I spent $10,000 of my own personal money, because I do volunteer work no matter what, out of my own money, and I spent $10,000. It runs, drives, it's out of the military. Who does the most maintenance on the vehicles? The military keeps their vehicles. They have to keep them up and running. So only reason they get rid of them is because the dates of them. You know, they move them out to put new ones in place. You don't have to spend $150,000 for a high-wheel vehicle. I spent my own money to buy it, and I got to go pick it up. I think when I get this cookie factory open, I'm going to pick it up. I hope I get it before the storm hits. But you know, not $150,000. You don't have to spend it. You can buy them all day long online. I did it. So that's my question.
Thank you.
Aaron, and I think the name might be I'm sorry? Uribe, 5667 Camilla Drive, Beaumont, Texas.
Good evening. I'm going to speak on homelessness like this lady and the gentleman before me. I also was not able to go to the meeting, so I may be ignorant of what our most current up-to-date stance is. With that, I just want to say September 1st is a little over 2 weeks away. With that comes the enactment of HB 1925, and this bill provides a moment where cities will either be forced to deal with homelessness, with the primary goal being to end homelessness, or they'll be forced to fill up county jails with homeless people simply for being homeless. I call on Beaumont to choose the former and set an example for other cities to look to. I know that Homeless Coalition has been started with the goal being to get on the same page with regards to providing the most effective and streamlined relief possible to the homeless. Sorry, I'm bad at public speaking. And to create a homeless database to better understand the city's problems. I think that's a huge first step, and I applaud those involved. I would ask that the city take on a role within this coalition to invest taxpayer money into this very worthy effort. We do not have to reinvent the wheel to end homelessness. It's been done before. Medicine Hat is a city in Canada that has took on the goal of ending homelessness a decade ago and has seen amazing results. We simply need to take this structure and apply it to our city. Medicine Hat's initial plan had 3 core goals, 2 of which we are already working towards via the Homeless Coalition. 1, coalesce the different nonprofit, church, and city programs to create a more streamlined and effective homeless outreach. 2, create a database to better understand the breadth of the issues so that the city can better respond. And 3, respond to the homelessness by immediately housing the homeless with no initial barriers or requirements. Housing in Step 3 looks a few different ways: permanent housing, semi-permanent housing, and emergency shelter. Medicine Hat has an intake that assigns the person or family a caseworker who decides what the circumstance calls for. Once the person or family is housed, the caseworker can then provide whatever outreach is needed: help with addiction, addressing any untreated mental health issues, establishing a permanent address for banking, welfare programs, IDs, etc., work with workforce solutions to find employment, or even provide employment opportunities with the city that are appropriate to the person's experiences. I believe that this last step is crucial and will be transformative to the city. Not only do I believe that but Medicine Hat proves it. A community that cares for every single person is a stronger and more just community. I admit I've not done as much as I could or should do for the homeless, and I need to do much, much more. But I know that there are amazing people within this community that you've heard from already tonight that have done and continue to do the hard work of helping the homeless, and they could use the help of a city government who is charged with deciding the best way to invest our taxes within this community. What better way to help these amazing people and groups than provide the structure and funds to house and provide the correct assistance via a housing program?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to have city council comments, and I'm going to start with you, Councilmember Durio.
No comment, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Getz.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I would like to express my gratefulness to our God for allowing those that have been afflicted with COVID to recover. Councilmember Samuel, my wife, and those out there that have suffered from this disease. I'm fully vaccinated. My wife's fully vaccinated. I do not believe that you should mandate somebody to be vaccinated, but I do believe that the vaccine does enable you to recover more quickly from this dreaded illness, and the proof is in the numbers. I know of very, very few people that have been vaccinated that have died from COVID. So, make your own choice. Don't live in fear, but make wise decisions. The second thing I want to do is confirm what I've heard rumors of is that we are scheduled to have a workshop next week on the homeless issue and on the Battleship Texas issue. Is that correct, Mr. Manager?
The mayor confirmed that. I think she's going to speak to it.
I'll speak to it.
Okay, well, I won't steal your
The
thunder.
council, just to answer your question, the council needs to decide if you're going to lead that because you are the chairperson of that committee, and I think it's fair that you lead it versus our staff, because the committee was formed for that purpose, and you ought to be able to lay out what your plan is and what the committee's plan is, who, what, when, where, why, cost, the whole 9 yards, so the council can know where you're trying to go, and then the council's going to decide what's enacted.
You're talking about the homeless. Cool. Well, I'm happy to do that. I will, of course, rely heavily on Chris Boone, who is a key staff on that, but I'm happy to do that and share with you the 15-point action plan that has been developed. I think that next week will bring a lot of the answers into focus that we have been working on with the Homeless Coalition for 2 years. Some amazing opportunities may soon be presenting itself to help us with our situation in Beaumont. It comes with a price tag. We can talk about that. I'll be glad to share that. And, thank you for agreeing to have a workshop on this key issue. We've heard tonight from so many citizens that have extreme concerns about this, and there's a whole lot more out there that aren't here tonight that share that. Battleship Texas too. Again, nobody wants a white elephant, like Mr. Watson said, but I think that if we can hear from the Battleship Texas Commission people and kind of get a better idea of what they're looking for and what we're able to offer, see if it's a good fit. Communication is a good thing. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Turner.
To everybody who came out and sat through 3 hours during the nighttime, you truly appreciate it. You truly, truly appreciate the staff who took the time out to make the presentation. You're definitely appreciating. I'm looking forward to working with y'all to work through some of these issues. Thank y'all.
Councilmember Felshaw.
No comment, Mayor.
Councilmember Samuel.
Nothing, Mayor.
Councilmember Neal.
No comment.
City Manager.
Mess you up. So, next week, a work session on the budget, capital program, discussion item on Battleship Texas, a consultant coming in as it relates to improvements within the water system, mostly as it relates to discolored water, and now the homeless issue. You may want to give consideration, if you have the time, to where maybe we have something in the morning as it relates to homelessness, and then have your regular meeting at 1:30, or you can try to do it all that day. You know, we don't know how many agenda items we normally have till Wednesday or Thursday of each week. So I'm just saying there's a lot. We're staff, that's why we're here. We're prepared to do it, but you might be here a while, just so it's something to consider.
Mayor?
I'm going to speak to it. If you'll give me just an
Sure.
opportunity, and I'll come back to you.
Okay.
That's everyone. Bart, did you have anything? Chris? Thank you. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming out. All of the comments that were made were excellent comments. Thank you for your time, staff. Great workshop, a lot of good information. Looking forward to working with, changing up some things to make it better for our citizens. So on next week, we will have Battleship Texas Foundation representatives here on August 24th. Also, water system assessment to look at our brown water situation. Also, I have something that I've been contacted about that I need to see if I could even fit it on the schedule that they were trying to do tonight. But it's only so much we can do on a night meeting or even an evening meeting. So, Councilmember Getz, I was looking at having either the Homeless Coalition work session, either we're gonna have to have it that morning or move it to the next week. U.S. Conference of Mayors has been canceled, so we need to look at the schedule to make changes for August 31st that we were looking at making some changes in the meeting because I want to have enough time to address it. I don't want to rush through it. I think it needs proper time so that we can address all of the issues and every entity that needs to be involved can state the information. Also, Deborah, to address your comment, House Bill 1925 goes in effect September 1st. House Bill 1925 is the bill that states no homeless person can sleep on state property, meaning the underpasses or take occupancy of state property. And so that goes in effect. That is a state mandate that goes in effect September 1st. This isn't mandated so that homeless people can go to jail. That's not why it came about. But there's tons of reasons. So you can go online and look up House Bill 1925, and we're less than 2 weeks away from September 1st. There has been some concerns that we've spoken about in the Homeless Coalition meeting as to homeless personal property, because we don't have housing to house their personal property that they have with them. So if you have a duffel bag or a basket of all of your belongings, the city does not have an appropriate holding space to house that. So there are some things that even our police department is looking at. How do we address these things without violating even, someone would say, well, they're homeless, but they're human beings and they have rights. as a human being and a citizen. So there's a lot of components to House Bill 25, but I will say that it is a problem, and thank God it's not a problem that you see in Austin or Houston or LA. However, we do have a growing homeless situation. I happen to live off of I-10 in Washington, so I see it every day. And thank God that you were able to help yourself in your situation. But it is scary when you have to walk behind yourself or make sure that you're locking your door. And I've been to your business establishment many times. You know, knew your mother for many, many years. Wonderful lady. And so I can't even imagine every step that you make having to wonder if I step in or step out of my business, if I'm going to be attacked. And it is frightening and scary for a female to be by herself. But you keep that stapler in your hand, I think the word will get out and you won't have a problem. I promise you, you won't. So it's a lot of issues that have to be addressed, and with that, everyone is working as hard as they possibly can to address all of the issues that concern our homeless situation. I was called today because someone stated that off of Gulf, they've moved from one side of the fence to the other side, but at some point, each person has to take responsibility for their property. And I just believe if you allow it one step, they're going to take two or three. And at some point, you have to control it yourself. And I know it's probably taxing on the business owner to constantly having to call the police, you know, day in and day out to make sure that you're being safe and your property is being taken care of. But at some point, I would have to think sooner or later they will stop, hopefully. So we have a lot of things to address. The ID that was mentioned, of course, you can't do anything without an ID. And that has also been addressed at the Homeless Coalition meeting. In addition to what can we do to have somewhere for them to sleep for people that are possibly working. And then after Salvation Army gets full, where can they go to the next place? And so it's not a Beaumont problem. If there was the perfect answer, we wouldn't have all of the problems everywhere else. And whoever has the answer, everybody will be looking for them. So it's something collectively that we all have to work towards for the betterment of our community and our city. And so hopefully we can address it and move towards a solution. I'm sure it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to always fit everybody. It's not a cookie cutter solution, but hopefully something will work with us all working together. So Mr. Getz, if I haven't addressed your concern, please feel free to speak up. I just see that with 3 other workshops plus whatever else come in, I just think that's just going to be a long, full meeting. And I think the homeless situation needs to have enough ample time.
I totally agree with you. And what I'm going to suggest is something I've already talked to Council Members Turner and Neal about in terms of scheduling, and that maybe we should consider having the workshop at our regular September 2nd Homeless Coalition meeting. Thinking about it logically, a lot of the people that are involved in this already have that date on their schedule.
Absolutely.
It's at the event center, so it'll give us enough room. And that time and date is already allocated, so instead of having a speaker come in, maybe we should have our workshop to present the memorandum that Mr. Boone authored and the 15-point action plan to go through that on September the 2nd at 2 o'clock.
Sounds great.
Okay,
Sounds
can we
good.
do that then? Okay,
That sounds good.
all right.
Okay, also, Mr. Coleman, our city health director, thank you so very much. The information you gave tonight, I had to catch my breath. It was breathtaking to hear the numbers. And so with that being said, this is the city health report that comes out every week. I'm sorry, daily. And you're behind a day because it comes out for the end of, like, tomorrow we will get today's numbers.
No, that's today's number.
This is today's numbers, but the rest of the evening up until, we will get that tomorrow. Right. Whatever the report that's in my hand is yesterday's numbers and
Today's numbers cut off at 3 o'clock.
cut off at 3 o'clock. Okay, cut off at 3 o'clock today. This is something we went back to when we saw that the numbers were just skyrocketing. And when you see 1,000 people in 1 week, that just goes to show you just how fast this is spreading. No one can mandate anything to you, but we are asking to please, at all costs, wear your mask. And if you don't get vaccinated for yourself, do it for others. We had someone to speak. Deborah came to the podium and spoke about her mother and herself fighting for her life. And thank God she was here to share that with us. And thank you so very much for sharing that, Deborah. So with that being said, it is 9:01. We thank you all for coming out, and we will adjourn. Thank you.